kilometers per hour. Today we can do 60 kilometers per hour. Before, the headway was 9 minutes, 12 minutes. Today, the headway is 3.4 minutes. Before, the passengers pre-pandemic was around 330,000. Pandemic, the passenger capacity was less than 200,000. If we were lucky, we'll make 220,000. As of today, a week ago, capacity for MRT3 touched and hit 350,000. On top of this, the 350,000 since the month of April was traveling in MRT3, libreng sakay. Hindi ba napakagandang benepisyo yan para sa ating mga kababayan? Hindi ba napakagandang blessing yan para sa ating kababayan? Lalo't higit ngayon na kung saan naghihikahos sila ng mga panggastos, naghahanap ng mga savings. Hindi ba ang laking tulong yan? Nasabi sa akin na nakinabang sa libreng sakay natin, Secretary Sani, sir, over 15 million passengers daw nakinabang na. Hindi ba napakaganda ho? Tignan natin yung LRT2 extension. For 2 decades in the making, the LRT2 East extension going to Antipolo is now operational. Before, plano-plano lang yan. Ito, totoo, sasakay ka na. Tignan mo rin, yung from Antipolo, 3 hours to just 40 minutes now because of the extension. Hindi ba napakaganda? Sa Duterte administration lang ho yan. Sa Duterte administration. Tignan natin yung LRT1 Cavite. If you go to Sukat, Parañaque, makakakita ho kayo ng mga constructions doon. Nakataas na yung mga girdels. Matatapos na ho yan. Matagal din ho. Nag-antay yung ating mga kababayan sa Baclaran, Parañaque at Nyog, Bacoor nitong tinatawag natin na LRT1 extension. Target ho namin, in accordance with our plan, if it will to be followed, matapos ho yan 2024 at magkaroon ho yan ng partial operability sa 2022. Marami ho mga ginawa dyan, nandiyan na yung trend na kung saan makikita nyo na talagang hindi bola-bola ito, totoo ito. Nandiyan na yung mga components upang sa ganon, yung biyahe sa Baclaran, Parañaque, papuntang Bacoor at Nyog ay magiging realidad. Nandiyan din ho yung tinatawag natin na MRT7. Yung MRT7, malapit na ho matapos yan. Kasama ho natin dyan yung San Miguel, proponent dyan na kung saan talagang tumutulong ho sila. Ito will reduce travel time between Quezon City and Bulacan from 2 to 3 hours to just 35 minutes. We expect partial operation by 2022-2023. Ito ho yung mga iba-ibang mga proyektong nandiyan sa ating mga trend. Pero alam ko na nag-aantay kayo, sasabihin nyo, asan yung subway? Tuloy ba yung subway? Tuloy ho yung subway. Listen to what I'm going to say. The subway has been a project for 50 years or more. If I tell you, if you go to the route where the subway will pass, you will see massive constructions there. In fact, by the first week of June or second week of June, the Transportation Department will perform an activity to convince the people of the Philippines that the subway is real at totoo. Ibababao na ho natin, sir, Seksani, yung tunnel boring machine. Once we put down the tunnel boring machine, the actual construction starts. In first or second week of June, we will do the simulation on what to do with the subway. Marahil tatanungin ninyo, may trend din na tatakbo, makikita nyo. Dapat hindi ko muna sinasabi sa inyo doon para surpresa na lang. Pero excited ako, nasabi ko na eh. Marahil ang tatanungin nyo, what happened after the Duterte administration? Tuloy ho ba yung subway? Yes, sir. Totoo, tuloy na tuloy. Let me impress to you 3 reasons why this subway is totoo, tama at tuloy-tuloy. Reason number 1, the funds are in place. Through the efforts of the Department of Finance, with the government of Japan and JICA, the funds are in place. In other words, walang problema sa pondo, nandiyan na yung pondo. Number 2, most of the contracts that are involved in the construction of the subway is already awarded. In fact, many has started. Hindi na ho matitigil yan. Pangatlong dahilan, yung right of way na umpisahan na, naayos na kausundo na. Kung meron ng pondo, kung gawa na yung kontrata at meron ng right of way, sabihin mo sa akin, Secretary Charlie Galvez, paano pa hihinto yan? Tuloy na ho ang subway. Sana lang pabaunan nyo ng dasal at tulong ang mga dadating na administrasyon upang matuloy itong proyektong ito. Huwag niyong pabaunan ng agam-agam, huwag niyong pabaunan ng duda, pabaunan niyo ng tiwala, pagkat sabi ko sa katatlong kadahilanan, tuloy ang subway. Nung nag-umpisa ho kami, maalala nyo, tataas na naman siya, no? Ayaw ko nga. Yung common station. Remember the common station? That was a major problem when the Duterte administration got in. Nag-aaway-aaway yung mga taipans. Napagkasundo-sundo yan. So, nag-agree na kung saan nilalagay. May kaso pa sa Korte Suprema yan. Tinanggal yung kaso, nag-compromise agreement. Lahat ho yan, away-away. Kung sabihin ko sa inyo, target ho namin na yung common station will be operational, partly operational by 2022 this year. Ito ho yung mga bagay-bagay na mga nagawa. Gusto niyong pakinggan? May oras pa ba ako yung PNR, yung papunta sa Clark, yung PNR, matatapos ho yan, sir, ma'am, promise. If the new administration will follow the timeline and the strategy we have formulated, this Clark railways will be operational by 2026. 2025 thereabout, target pa rin yun, 2026, baka pwede na. Napakaganda ho ito, magkakaroon ng connectivity ang ating relays. Maganda ho talaga ito. Gusto nyo yung Bicol International Airport? Bicol Rails? Kung sabihin ko sa iyo, I can start anytime now. San Pablo, Lucena, Candelaria, anytime now. Operational yan after a hiatus of more than 5 years. And this Lucena, Candelaria, San Pablo will be an integral part in doing and finalizing the Bicol Express. Manggagaling ho yan, connectivity sa Makati, papuntang Alabang, Calamba, and then co-connect dyan. Ito ho, buo ang Bicol Railways. Ang Bicol, napakaswerte. Meron ng international airport, meron pang Bicol Express. Hindi ba panalo? Let me just say one thing while I stated that. It goes to show that the economic program, infrastructure program of President Duterte is not bounded by political color. Alam ho natin kung ano yung Bicol. Pero ngayon ho, naririnig at naririnig ninyo na sa Bicol, nandiyan yung international airport at nandiyan yung Riles. gagawin at bubuin sa termino ng ating presidente. This is an economic program that is not colored with any political affiliation. Mindanao Railways Partial Operation 2025. Iiwan na po natin sa dadating na administrasyon yan. Meron na ho tayong tinatawag na right-of-way mobilization program. Dapat ituloy lang ho yan. Okay ho yan. And so, makikita ninyo, meron ba tayong mapa dito? Yung mapa kanina sa aviation? Can you show the map of the Philippines sa aviation? Yung pula, yan ho yung mga merong bagong airport at merong bagong projects. Makikita nyo na halos lahat sa Republika ng Pilipinas ay may improvement sa aviation. Hindi ba maganda? Hindi ba magaling? Hindi ba panalo si Duterte? Palakpakan nyo naman si Duterte. We have touched on aviation, we have touched on rails. Let's revisit maritime. Earlier I mentioned, eto na, nawawala na. Earlier I mentioned that we are an archipelago. Alam niyo ba, mahigit 500, yes sir, 500 projects ang nagawa sa maritime. 500 projects in barely 6 years. Big projects, commercial ports, leisure ports, community ports. Of the more than 500 projects, half of that was done by DOTR and funded by DOTR. Ito ho yung mga community projects, mga leisure ports. Half of that was funded and performed and completed by PPA, some by the other attached agencies. Ano naman po yung mga puertong nagawa natin dito sa maritime? Nandiyan dyan ho yung sa Lumage. Akala ko pabababayin na ako eh. I'm okay. Yung sa Lumage. Ito, cruise port ito sa norte. Wala kayong naririnig na norte kanina except for Bigan. Di sa Lumage, may puerto ho tayo dyan, cruise port. Actually, nag-umpisa ng cruise port dyan pre-pandemic. Natigil lang dahil sa pandemic. Ito, natayo ho yan. Married with Salumage is another cruise port at Ilocos Norte. Ito ho, dalawa. Cruise port yan. Magandang pagkakataon yan at maganda para sa ekonomiya ng Ilocos. Yung sa Puerto Princesa, madami ho tayong nagawa dyan. Noon, sinasabi natin yung Puerto Princesa ay, pang turista lang. Hindi na po yan. Meron na hong kabuhayan, meron ng business dyan. In fact, we have connected Puerto Princesa, Palawan with other Asian countries like Malaysia and Indonesia, na kung saan makikita mo yung mga improvements. Can we flash on the screen some of the airports that we have put up in Palawan? Hello. At least it gives me time to rest my voice. We have put up ports in Palawan. Go to Palawan and you'll be surprised with so many ports that we have put up. Marami rin hong puertong itinayo kami sa Bohol. Maraming puerto na itinayo sa Visayas at Mindanao. Total nga, kagaya ng sinabi ko, mahigit 500. Imagine, 500 for barely 6 years. Noon, 12 taon. Baka 5 lang ang nagawa eh. Tayo, 6 na taon. 500 mahigit. Siguro dapat lang palakpakan yung economic team saka yung build. Doon ho, makikita natin yung mga improvement. At saka, emphasize ko lang, kasi I don't like to take much of time of the other speakers. I have taken enough already. Kunti na lang. Let me just state that it is only at the time of the Duterte administration that we have passenger terminal ports whose capacity, passenger capacity, is 3,000, 3,500, 4,000. Never before in the history of this country has there been passenger terminal that capacity is 3,000, 3,500, and 4,000. Never before. And to top it, alam mo ba, sir, aircon yan. Alam mo ba na ginagawa ng mga tao, pasyalan ngayon yan. Ganyan ho, kaganda yung mga ginagawa natin, mga pasilidad sa maritime. Paspasan ko na lang ho yung road. Yung road hindi ho malalayo. Yung mapa niyan, yung mapa ng maritime, can you flash on the screen? Ito, yung mapa ng maritime. Bakit naging puti ito? Di ba dapat green yan? Lahat ho yung puti na yan, it shows the places where the maritime improvements and constructions have been done. You saw that same sa aviation. Makikita mo na magtutugma yung performances ng aviation at maritime dito sa making Filipino life convenient and comfortable. On the road sector, PITX, naku, nung inumpisahan namin yan, katakot-takot na lipusta inabot ko dyan. Pangit, walang kwenta. Ngayon, ang gumagamit ng PITX, 100,000 mahigit. Eat your words. It shows that this terminal is functionable. It shows that this terminal is a partner to connectivity and mobility. Soon we expect and soon we want to rise, to have other terminals in Bukawi, in Santa Rosa, and in Marikina. Ito, meron na ho sa Marikina, saka Santa Rosa, nag-ooperate na yan. Alam mo ba, sa ganda nitong, sir, nakapunta ka na sa PITX? Uy, palagay ko, hindi ka pa nakapunta dun. Kung merong airport, meron din road port. Kasi parang airport ito. Aircon, in real time, lahat, the ticket, napakaganda. Never before we had this. Sa panahon ng Duterte, meron isang ganyan at magkakaroon pa ng maraming ganyan. Plus ng plus yung oras, 0-0, no more. Ayaw ako tigilan. Ayaw ko nga. The more you do that, the more I will lengthen my speech. EDSA busway libreng sakay. Kung merong libreng sakay sa MRT3, meron din hong libreng sakay sa EDSA busway. Product of service contracting. Alam mo ba yung service contracting? Ito yung bagong system na kung saan may kontrata LTO, LTFRB at DOTR sa mga operators ng bus. I-pick up ng pasahero, pati yung jeepney, modernized jeepney, ng pasahero sa one destinasyon. Bababa sa isang destinasyon on predetermined time. In other words, wala na yung agawan ng sasakyan. Lalakad ho yan, may laman o wala, magsasakay at magbababa. In other words, predictable ang biyahe. Ang maganda dyan, libre. Libre. Hindi ba ang laking tulong yan? May libreng sakay na sa MRT3, may libreng sakay pa sa EDSA. Ganyan ho, meron tayong libreng sakay, meron tayong service contracting. Never before has this novelty and new improvements been done in so many years of various administration. Ngayon lang ho ginawa yan. Pinagtutulakan at pinagtutulakan ko yung PUB Modernization Program. I want to change the safety capability of our vehicles. Kailangan ho, hindi lang malinis, kailangan ligtas. Why? Because safety is a shared responsibility. Safety should never be compromised. Kaya nga ba, dapat inumpisahan ko yung modernization program, nagsusumamo ako sa bagong administrasyon na ituloy niyo po yung tinatawag na modernization program pagkat yan ho ang susi ng kaligtasan ng ating mga mamamayan sa kanilang pagbiyahe. Marami hong proyektong ginagawa pa tayo. Nandiyan dyan yung Cebu Bus Rapid Transit. In the next few weeks, Seksani, tatayo na yung mga tarpaulin at i-announce na yung mga destinasyon at pupuntahan ng ating mga Cebu Bus Transit. Meron din ho ang Davao Public Transportation Modernization Program. So that makikita nyo na yung programa natin, hindi lang sa Kalakhang, Maynila, nandiyan din ho yung Cebu, nandiyan yung Davao. Ngayon, meron bang bike lane bago pumasok si President Duterte? Wala. Ngayon ho, as I speak, we have completed 563 kilometers of bike lane networks all over the country and continuing. Meron na ho sa Kalakhang, Maynila, meron sa Davao, meron sa Cebu. Ito ho, happy-happy yung mga operators, yung mga bikers. At sabi nila, salamat, President Duterte, binigyan nyo kami ng isang mode of transport. Salamat, President Duterte, pagkat itong mode of transport na to ay hindi lang maganda kung hindi ligtas. Ito ho, never before has this been done. So that you will see that in the term of President Duterte, we went far and beyond of what was traditionally done. We were not afraid to do innovations and creative approaches to make the Filipino life convenient and comfortable. Dito ho sa LTFRB, linons na ho natin yung modernization program. Tulungan nyo ho. I-touch ko lang ho yung tinatawag natin na LTO. Ayaw mo yung plaka nun? Ni-import pa natin yan, sir. Ngayon, hindi na. Ginagawa na dito yung mga plaka. Alam nyo kung anong gumagawa? Makakala nyo, mano-mano. Robot. May dalawa kaming robot dyan. So, walang aksidente, mabilis ang gawa. Saka ang mahalaga dyan, pinangalanan nila yung robot, yung isang robot, Art. Yung pangalawang robot, Egay. So, Art and Egay. Yun yun. Inuuto-uto rin nila ako eh. That's part of being in power. And so, madami yung ginagawa dyan. Digitalization, digitization. There is no substitute to that. Nakaligtaan ko ho kanina before I end yung Philippine Coast Guard. Kasi napakahalaga ng ginawa ng Philippine Coast Guard sa termino ng ating Pangulo hanggang ngayon. Alam niyo ba, when I started Secretary Lorenzana as DOTR, there were only 6,000 warm bodies at Philippine Coast Guard. Alam mo ba, sir, that as I speak today, 22,400 ang population ng Philippine Coast Guard. Alam niyo ho ba na yung Philippine Coast Guard, as I speak today, not only has the personnel, but has the facility to make sure that they are able to do their job and do their job properly. Nandiyan ho yung mga facility, nandiyan yung chopper, nandiyan yung longboat, nandiyan lahat, name it, it's there. So that when you have the people and you have the facility for them to do their job, okay at okay. But what is important is we couple the improvement on the personnel, we couple the improvement on the facility with what we call competence building. Kaya nga sige-sige ang training. Kaya nga sige-sige. Kaya nga kung paghihimayin mo at pagsasamahin mo yung tatlong ito, panalo. Nandiyan ho yung Philippine Coast Guard. Kaya nga ba makikita mo yung Philippine Coast Guard, hindi lang ho sa West Philippine Sea, hindi lang sa karagatan, makikita mo na rin ang Philippine Coast Guard. Tumutulong sa airport, tumutulong sa kalsada, tumutulong sa relief operation. The Coast Guard will always be there. Panalo ang Philippine Coast Guard. I am proud to be associated with the Philippine Coast Guard. Let me now abbreviate my presentation a little bit. Masyado na akong madaming ninakaw na oras sa mga susunod na speaker. For that, sorry. Alam nyo, ladies and gentlemen, we may not have solved all the transport problems in the 6 years. But siguro hindi namin nagawa aksipin nyo naman na we have addressed many. Never before in the history of this country has the Department of Transportation done so much in so short a time. Kailangan ipagmalaki ito. Notwithstanding COVID-19, notwithstanding the earthquakes, notwithstanding the typhoons, eto ho yung nagawa ng Department of Transportation. Eto ho yung ligasiya ng ating Pangulo, President Rodrigo Duterte. At sa aking pagtatapos at paglalahad ng ating mga nagawa, isa lang ho ang sasabihin ko, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. President, fellow Filipinos, in the Department of Transportation, we delivered. Thank you very much. Ang mandato ng DOTR sa pagsasaayos ng transport system ay binigyan emphasis ng ating mahal na Pangulo. Sabi niya, ito yung kabuuan ng mandato. Road sector, maritime sector, aviation sector, rail sector, it's all about making the Filipino life convenient and comfortable.
Kung panahon na nagka-problema po tayo, mabagal po ang ating takbuhan at maiinit po yung ating mga bagon. Maraming mga negatibong komento.
Mahirap. Kumikita ang MRT, ang taon na humihirap pa rin.
Nawala po lahat yun pagkatapos sa rehabilitation natin sa ilalim ng Build program ni Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte.
Kasama rin kasi sa aming advocacy ang pagbibigay ng sensitivity training sa ating mga guard na naka-assign sa mga MRT station. Naramdaman ko yung pagbabago na yan kasi dati noon hindi kami pinapansin ng mga guard. Nahayaan lang kami. Ngayon, malayo pa lang kami. Pag may nakitang persons with disability, ina-assist na talaga.
Nung pandemic, I was also bike-to-work person kasi wala na kaming ibang mode of transportation dito sa Cebu. You're comfortable enough, wala nang makakadisgrasya sa iyo kasi andito ka na sa linya mo, sa bike lanes mo. So, it will listen ka ng disgrasya dito, specifically yung sa mga bikes.
Sa old terminal, hindi siya ganun kalaki, tsaka yung mga gamit doon hindi siya sophisticated. Unlike ngayon dito, mapapawaw ka talaga dito sa bagong airport. Tsaka super amazing siya.
Ang Pilipinas, mas madaming tubig kesa lupa. Ibig sabihin, dapat magkaroon ng connectivity. Kaya nga, inaayos natin yung connectivity by air. Inaayos natin yung connectivity by maritime.
Ang Tagbilaran Seaport po dati, isa po siyang maliit lang na port, tapos wala siyang masyadong kaayusan, walang sistema. Purely cargos ang kinekater niya. I-rehabilitate na po ito ng DOTR. Kasama po sa mga development ang mga facilities na tourist-friendly.
Yung seaport po namin dito is very improving. And so far sa our international local tourists is so nice and very accommodating po.
Yung improvements na ginawa natin, never before in the past administration have we done so much in so short a time. Kaya nga ba, sa panahon ni President Rodrigo Duterte, masasabi natin, indeed, the golden age of infrastructure in the Philippines is already in place. At nang sa ganun, yung ekonomiya ay malago, yung ekonomiya ay makakaroon ng growth and development.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Ms. Lalaine Guanzon.
Magandang araw, Pilipinas. Ako si Laleen Guanzon, a person with disability. Isang aktibong advocate ng aming sektor, a proud Makatizen. Sa panahon ngayon, matatawag na pangunahing mode of transportation ang Manila Railway Transit o ang popular na MRT3. Bukod sa mabilis, ay murang pamasahe. Ito rin ay kumbinyente at ligtas na sakyan. Ang rehabilitasyon ng MRT3 ay naghatid ng kaginhawaan sa libo-libong mananakay higit sa mga ordinaryong Pilipino na araw-araw nagko-commute. Napalitan na rin ang mga lumang bagon at higit na napabilis ang pag-usad ng mga ito. Maging sa panahon ng pandemya, hindi dapat matakot. Mahigpit na ipinatutupad ang health protocol ng pangasiwaan ng MRT. Naging mas person with disability o PWD friendly ang mga staff at empleyado ng MRT. Sa katulad kong wheelchair user, mas gusto kong sumakay ng MRT kaysa mag-grab o mag-taxi. Bukod sa mura, malamig at iwas polusyon pa, humihikayat ito ng mga motorista at mga pribadong sasakyan para sumakay sa MRT upang maibsan at lumuwag ang traffic sa EDSA. Kasabay po nito, practical na rin dahil sa mataas na presyo ng gasolina sa pandaigdigang merkado. Salamat sa lahat ng mga pagbabago na naganap sa iyong termino, sa pagsasaayos ng mga sangay ng gobyerno para sa mabilis at epektibong serbisyo, sa pagbibigay tugon sa mga hinaing ng mga persons with disability, unti-unting natutugunan ang aming mga pangangailangan. Sa tulong ng makabagong teknolohiya, napapagaan at nagdudulot ng kapakinabangan upang maging produktibong mamamayan kaming mga taong may kapansanan. Maraming salamat, Pangulong Duterte, sa lahat ng mga bagay na iyong pinagsikapang mapaunlad, lalo na sa sektor ng transportasyon. Ang pagpapatupad ng accessibility upang magkaroon ng barrier-free environment. Ito ay matatawag na legasiya ng iyong administrasyon. May pagpatuloy nawa ng bagong pamunuan ang lahat ng iyong magagandang proyekto tungo sa isang progresibo at maunlad na Pilipinas. Kaya, tara na, sakay na! Libre po ang pagsakay ng MRT mula pa po noong buwan ng Marso at sa kasalukuyan. Extended pa nga po hanggang June 30. Kaya ano pa ginagawa nyo? Malapit nang matapos ang termino ng ating dakilang Pangulo. Pero sabi nga, tara na, unlimited to. At maraming salamat, Pangulong Duterte. Saludo po ako at ang bansang Pilipinas.
Maraming salamat, Ms. Laleen Guanzon. And now, please welcome on stage, Mr. Augusto Pascual.
Sa atin pong mahal na Pangulo, kahit wala po siya ngayon dito, kay Secretary Arto Gade at sa lahat po ng Cabinet Secretaries, to our dignitaries and luminaries, a pleasant good morning. Isa pong mapagpalang araw sa lahat. Ako po si Augusto Pascual, General Manager po ako ng isang transport cooperative sa Bohol po. Ang amin pong kooperatiba ay isang tourist transport provider na accredited ng DOT at ng OTC. Ang amin pong kooperatiba ay isa sa mga benepisyaryo ng pinaganda at pinalaki na Tagbilaran Pier, Pantalan po. Alam po natin lahat na ang Pantalan, ang primary objective po ay para sa kargamento. Pero dahil po sa pinaganda na pantalan ng Tagbilaran, hindi lamang po ito sa kargamento, bagkos ito na rin po ay naging isang tourist pier, tourist port. Dahil po ang Bohol ay isang tourist destination. Kung hindi po ito pinondohan ng DOTR, ng Duterte administration, siguro po ang aming kooperatiba ay matagal nang nawala. Lalo na po nung tayo ay tamaan ng pandemya, na ang tourist transport po ay isa sa mga sektor na masyadong naapektuhan. Wala po kaming biyahe, ang aming mga driver wala pong trabaho. Pero unti-unti po ngayon, bumabalik po ang mga turista na. At nung pong April last year, nandun po si Secretary Artugade, nag-inaugurasyon po siya sa Terminal 2, bagong Terminal 2 po ng Tagbilaran Pier, at ito po ay may 2,000 capacity. Dati po, nung hindi pa po na-improve ang Tagbilaran Pier, ang bumibiyahe po na fast craft po between Cebu and Bohol, mga 2-3 lang. Ngayon po, 6 hanggang 8 biyahe po araw-araw. Dahil po sa magandang pier ng Tagbilaran, by word of mouth, ang mga pasahero po natin, ang mga turista, ay naiingganya na bumalik, at ito po ay isang malaking katulungan sa aming kooperatiba. So again po, Secretary Artugade, kay President Tatay Digong, maraming salamat po sa mga proyekto na inyong nagawa. At sana po sa susunod na administrasyon ay maipagpatuloy po ang magandang na panimulan ng Duterte administration para sa kapakanan at sa kaiuunlad ng bayang Pilipinas. Maraming salamat po at magandang umaga.
Thank you, Mr. Augusto Pascual. And now please welcome on stage Ms. Felicidad Into.
Magandang araw po sa lahat na nandito ngayon sa makasaysayang Legacy Summit ng ating kagalang-galang na Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Ako po ay nagpapasalamat sa pag-imbita at maging isa sa mga piniling magtestimonya ng mga magagandang naidulot at naitulong na mga proyekto ng ating gobyerno, lalo-lalo na sa iba't ibang ahensya ng ating gobyerno, lalo na sa katulad namin na maliliit na negosyante o tinatawag na micro, small, medium enterprises or the MSME. Napakahirap ng sitwasyon namin. Kami ang mostly affected during the pandemic dahil tourist establishments po kami. Kung wala pong mga guests na pumupunta sa General Santos City, wala po kaming kikitain dahil locally made product kami, sawa na yung mga local namin doon sa mga product namin, so nabibili lang ito ng mga guests na pumupunta ng Gensan. Dahil nag-pandemic, nahinto po ito, nakaranas po kami ng hirap dahil nag-lockdown, nagsara po, at marami pong mga negosyante na hanggang ngayon ay nagsara din po. Dahil dito, kailangan naming ipagpatuloy at itaguyod dahil sa aming mga pamilya na kailangang mabuhay. Ang kumpanya namin ay isang nag-advokasya ng MSME Development na nag-consolidate po ng mga local products ng buong region, ng Region 12, at sa layuning makatulong sa kapwa na maliliit at magkaroon ng pagkain sa pagkainan, na makapag-aral ng mga anak at maging masayang pamilya. Dahil dito kami ay nabigyan ng pagkakataon na magkaroon ng One Town, One Product na tinatawag natin na Auto Hub ng DTI. At ito po'y project na pinagtulungan po ng Department of Transportation ng DOTR at ng Civil Aviation Authority of the Philippines na magkaroon po kami ng isang marketplace sa loob ng Gensan Airport na nag-umpisa po noong September 23, 2021, na nag-open po ang ating travel initially. At ito po ay napakalaking tulong dahil ito po ay nagbenepisyo ng more than 5,000 MSMEs. Hindi pa po kasama yung mga pamilya nila at mga workers. Malaki pong tulong talaga ito. So narinig ko kanina kay Secretary Togade at nakita ko yung kabuuan ng proyekto ng DOTR. Malaki pong inspirasyon para sa amin na magpatuloy po ng aming hanap buhay ng mga maliit na negosyante sa malalayong lugar dahil makakapag-market na po kami sa mga destinasyon na kailangan namin puntahan. Lalo na po ngayon ang ongoing negotiation ng aming local government ng connectivity po ng market namin from Jensen direct to Clark na sana po ay ma-approve na. Ang bagong Jensen Airport ay malaking tulong sa pagtransport ng mga locally at globally competitive na mga produkto at serbisyo. Ito ay isang patunay na seryosong serbisyo ng ating gobyerno para sa ikaunlad ng lahat at sambayanang Pilipino. Kami at mga kasamang MSME sa buong Pilipinas, hindi lang sa Region 12, maliit na negosyo ay taus-pusong nagpapasalamat kay Pangulong Duterte sa lahat ng pagkakataon at suportang binigay para makabangon sa kahirapan. Ganon din sa pasasalamat sa ating ahensya ng DOTR, CAAP, DTI, LGUs, at iba pang ahensya ng gobyerno ng DA, DOST, TESDA at iba pa, sa matapat na serbisyo at sana ay magpatuloy para sa kaunlad ng bawat isang mamamayang Pilipino. Pati na rin po pasasalamat sa aming local government ng General Santos City at ang buong probinsya ng South Cotabato at Region 12. Tayo ay magtulungan at magmahalan. Ito po ang key ng success. Marami pong salamat at God bless us all.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lalaine, Mr. Augusto, and Ms. Felicidad. Before we go on, I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Presidential Advisor for COVID-19 Response, Secretary Vince Dizon, Vice Chairperson and Commissioner of the Climate Change Commission, Secretary Robert Eric Borge, and DOST Secretary Fortunato de la Peña. Now, rapid, inclusive, and sustained economic growth have been part of the government directives which aim to create more jobs and increase competitiveness of private enterprises. To discuss the legacies on economic development, let's give a big hand to the Department of Finance's Secretary, Carlos G. Dominguez III.
Good morning. Good morning. My fellow colleagues in the Cabinet, led by Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea, members of the Diplomatic Corps, our reliable partners in the business community, development organizations, and the academe, fellow workers in government, and friends from the media here and abroad. Good morning. The presidency of Rodrigo Roa Duterte will surely rank among the most productive administrations in our history. His term will be remembered as the moment when the country made the turn towards more inclusive growth and prosperity. With President Duterte's bold leadership and strong political will, many socio-economic reforms measures that languished for decades on the shelves of Congress were finally enacted into law. The passage of the Ease of Doing Business Act paved the way for improved and efficient delivery of public services. We enacted the Philippine Identification Act, which brings us closer to the goal of achieving e-governance and greater financial inclusion among our people. As of May 3, a total of 64.8 million individuals nationwide have registered for the national ID through this program. The Land Bank of the Philippines has cleared the way for 7.9 million previously unbanked registrants to be part of the formal banking system. In addition, we fulfilled President Duterte's promise of establishing a bank dedicated to the needs of Filipinos working abroad. The Overseas Filipino Bank is our first branchless, digital-only bank in this country. It now serves overseas Filipinos in 116 countries. The Rice Stratification Law was finally achieved after more than 30 years of failed attempts under previous administrations. The law opened up the Philippine rice market and in turn lowered the price of our country's staple food for more than 100 million Filipinos and has kept the rice prices very stable. As a result, rice is no longer the main contributor to our overall inflation rate. The Rice Stratification Law ensures that farmers benefit directly, providing at least 10 billion pesos each year for mechanization, high-quality seeds, access to credit, and training. After many years of intense political debate, it was only during the Duterte administration that the Coco Levy Law was finally enacted. This marks a promise fulfilled by the President who, in his 2019 SONA, vowed to return these funds taken arbitrarily from the pockets of Filipinos back to their true owner. The Duterte administration decisively passed and implemented the most comprehensive tax reform program ever in this country. This provided robust and recurring revenues that helped expand social services and supported our massive economic investments in modern infrastructure. TRAIN, or the Tax Reform for Acceleration and Inclusion Act, reduced the personal income taxes for 99% of our taxpayers, giving them much-needed relief after 20 years of non-adjustment. Through TRAIN, we have basically given out a 14-month pay every year to our wage earners. No past administration increased sin taxes more than once. President Duterte and Congress raised sin taxes 3 times within his term. This demonstrates what a strong political will can do to protect people from consuming products that have negative impact on their health. The excise taxes on tobacco and alcohol products improved funding for the Universal Health Care Program, which is another landmark reform of this administration. All in all, TRAIN and the other enacted packages of tax reform program enabled the government to raise 575.8 billion pesos in incremental revenues during the first 4 years of implementation. In addition to modernizing our tax policies, the Duterte administration aggressively pushed for the full digitalization of the Bureau of Internal Revenue and the Bureau of Customs to enhance tax administration and reduce corruption. Through bold tax reforms and better tax administration, we were able to raise our revenue effort to a 2-decade high and our debt-to-GDP ratio to a historic low. The international credit rating agencies recognized us by giving us the best credit ratings ever, ranging from BBB plus to a AAA. As a result, we were able to bring down our borrowing costs and raise bond issuances with very tight spreads in the international markets. This high credit rating also spilled over to the lower borrowing costs of the private sector and individuals. Our robust revenue flow and concessional financing allowed us to sustainably fund the Build, Build, Build program, which is one of the lasting legacies of President Duterte. This administration was able to raise infrastructure spending to above 5% of GDP, double the level recorded by the previous 4 administrations. Under this administration, big-ticket infrastructure projects that were faced with delays for decades were finally implemented, providing quality jobs for over 6.5 million people. Apart from infrastructure, the Duterte administration also invested heavily in social services to boost human capital development through government programs and by infusing the largest ever capital to the Land Bank of the Philippines, the Development Bank of the Philippines, and the Philippine Guarantee Corporation. We provided healthcare coverage financing for enterprises and local government units, housing, unconditional cash transfers, quality jobs, free education in state colleges and universities, and free irrigation water. These game-changing measures and programs made the Philippines one of the economic leaders in the region, growing over 6% annually. The same reforms helped us gain the financial strength to weather the worst of the COVID-19 crisis. When the pandemic struck, the Duterte administration moved quickly to protect Filipino lives. Like the Filipino family, the government did what was needed for the country to survive the pandemic. The Philippines' direct response to COVID-19 crisis so far amounted to 3 trillion pesos, equivalent to 15.6% of our GDP. Our social amelioration program assisted 18 million families, and small business wage subsidy program kept more than 3 million workers afloat. These emergency subsidies amounted to about 250 billion pesos, the largest social protection program in Philippine history. Funding our social protection and economic stimulus measures has been a challenge. But the pandemic found us in a strong financial and fiscal position, ready to protect our citizens. We successfully negotiated funding to procure COVID-19 vaccines for our people, which was primarily sourced from multilateral banks. We were able to bring together the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank under a joint financing arrangement for the purchase of these life-saving doses. This was the first in the Asia-Pacific region and probably in the world. Despite the increased borrowings to procure vaccines and provide relief to our people while maintaining our economic investments, our debt level remains sustainable. Throughout the crisis, our historic high credit rating were maintained amidst downgrades among our peers globally. This is a testament to the excellent record of prudent spending and fiscal discipline. Even as the world has been hit by the pandemic, our game-changing reforms bolstered our country's ability to recover and rebuild. The enactment of CREATE, or the Corporate Recovery and Tax Incentives for Enterprises Act, and amendments to the Retail Trade Liberalization Act, Public Service Act, and Foreign Investments Act will bring in the high-value investments that our country needs to upskill our workforce and further modernize our economy. As the pandemic subsides, the Philippine economy is now well on its way to rapid recovery. Our strategies in 2021 have culminated in a full-year growth of 5.7%, exceeding targets and expectations. The economy even grew by 8.3% in the first quarter of 2022, making the country's expansion the highest in the ASEAN region and among our credit rating peers. I could go on and on with all the Duterte administration's unprecedented economic achievements realized in just 6 years, but our time is limited. Let me close by saying that I am extremely proud to have served under this president. Although this was a period challenged by a pandemic, it was also a time that the government firmly demonstrated that it could respond decisively to any emergency. The next administration will inherit many hard-won reforms. They will assume the office with the basic groundwork for rapid and inclusive growth already in place. President Duterte's final legacy is a confident and hopeful Filipino people earnestly looking to a future of sustained progress. At this point, I would like to thank again President Duterte and all my colleagues in the cabinet and all my colleagues in the Department of Finance and the attached agencies for working together to help make this administration one of the best ever. Thank you.
Kami po ay nagsimula sa pagtitinda muna ng mga sampalok hanggang sa maisipan ng asawa ko na maglagay na kami ng tinda sa labas. Tumagal ng tumagal, nakayanan na rin namin na makapagpatayo ng bahay sa Provident dahil sa tindahang maliit na yon. Kaya lang, dalawang bagyo ang dumating. Una yung Undoy, pangalawang bagyo. Ito na nga ang Ulysses. Doon na talaga nahirapan kami kasi lubog yung bahay, pati paninda, lalos.
Itong PPG is a subset ng program ng livelihood na nakafocus doon sa mga naapektuhan ng kalamidad, ng baha, lindol, kung anumang sakuna yung naabot nila. 8,000 worst, hindi utang yon, grant yon. Paikutin na nila yung pera na yon. Pero pag gusto pa nila mag-expand, pwede sila sa microfinance. And dito sa administrasyon ng ating Pangulong Duterte, talagang na more than double ang nabigay na budget dito sa area na to.
Yung tulong ng DTI ay talagang napakalaking bagay. Siyempre, imbis na makagilap ako na pangdagdag sa paninda, andyan na siya.
Ito ay habilin ng ating Pangulong Duterte. Tulungan natin yung mga maliliit talaga na tao, na negosyo. Kaya talagang accelerate natin yung program para sa micro SME development. Ang talagang objective kasi natin, yung micro SMEs, hindi sila forever micro. Kailangan yung micro maging small, maging medium, eventually sila yung maging large.
Yan ang nagawa sa akin ng PPG. So, malaking ginhawa para sa akin. Kaya nasubukan ko, wala ka talagang malalapitan. Yan lang talaga ang nakatulong sa akin. Kaya maraming salamat sa DTI.
We'd like to call on stage Rosario Santos.
Magandang tanghali po sa inyong lahat. Ako po si Rosario Santos, 66 years old, may asawa at 2 anak. Ang una po namin pinagkakakitaan ay paggawa ng sampalok. Kinalaunan ay gumawa na rin kami ng matamis na pili at saka mani. Yan ay tinitinda lang namin sa loob ng bahay. Subalit, napag-isipan ng asawa ko na maglabas na kami ng tindahan. Halos 3 dekada na nang itinayo namin yon ay 1986. Pagkatapos, doon sa tindahang maliit na yon, doon namin kinukuha yung araw-araw namin pangangailangan. Napagtapos namin ang aming anak hanggang kolehiyo, doon din sa tindahang maliit. At nakapagpagawa rin kami ng bahay sa hirap at tiyaga sa Provident. Subalit, napakasakit ng nangyari dahil 2 bagyo ang dumaan. Una, Undoy, 4 na buwan pa lang na natatayo yung bahay. Inabot kami ng baha, lubog ang bahay, pati tindahan, halos walang natira, pati bahay namin, lubog sa puti. At pagkatapos, puti na lang ay may mababait akong suki na tiwala ang nangyari dahil halos 3 dekada akong suki, pinahiram nila ako, pati sa bigas, pinautang ako ng bigas hanggang sa kalaunan ay nabayaran din namin. Subalit, napakalungkot ng taong 2020. Bagyo na naman ang dumating, ang Ulysses, ang pandemic, at pagkatapos ay inopera pa ang asawa ko ng lus-lus. Ako, sa totoo po, ako ay hindi humihingi ng tulong kung kailangan, kung kaya pa naman. Kaya lang, grabe po ang aming inabot. May nagsabi sa akin na lumapit po ako sa DTI. Una ko pang punta po ay sa munisipyo. Pagdating ko po doon, hindi daw po nagbibigay ang DTI doon.
may tumulong sa akin, sinabi, pumunta po raw doon ako sa DTI. Pagdating ko po sa DTI, sabi nung staff, hindi na po raw nagbibigay ng ayuda. Nalungkot ako dahil nangangatog-ngatog pa ako at nangingilid ang aking luha dahil talagang ako po ay nangangailangan. Buti po, may isang mabait at may gininto ang puso. Kinuha niya yung pangalan ko at pagkatapos pati address, sa 1 taon daw po. Pag nagbigay ng ayuda, sabi niya sa 1 taon. Pagkatapos po, umuwi na ako. Kaya lang po, napakabait po ng Diyos. Hindi pa lumalagpas ang 1 araw. Wala pa po yatang 1 oras. Tumawag po sa bahay at sinabing, pumunta ka rito, bilisan mo dahil magse-seminar na. Ako po daw ang napili at ipapalit doon sa isang na-disqualified. Dalawa po ang aking naramdaman. Una po ay masaya ako, pero nalungkot din po ako para doon sa napili na disqualify. Pagkatapos po, dali-dali akong pumunta doon. Baha pa po yun sa amin at lubog puro puti. Kaya lang po, talagang puro himala po ang nangyari. Di ba po ba himala yung kasasabi lang sa 1 taon, pero wala pang 1 oras, tinawagan ako. At paglabas ko, kahit puro putik doon, puro baha, biglang may parating naman pong tricycle. At parang may sumasalubong sa akin at pumunta po ako sa munisipyo. Sa Taranta ko po, mali pala ang punta ko, dapat pala sa DTI. Bumalik po uli ako sa DTI. Pagdating doon, ando na naman po yung mabait na staff na sinalubong ako dahil ako'y talaga pong nangangatog, nanghihina, wala po akong lakas. Sabi kong ganon. At tapos sinama niya po ako sa boss nila at kinausap at sinabing, barya-barya lang po ang makukuha. Sabi ko, kahit barya-barya lang yan. Sabi ko gano'n, tatanggipin ko dahil sa hirap ng buhay, kahit piso, hindi po kayo makakapulot. Sinama ako sa seminar. Pagdating sa seminar, ako po pala ay mabibigyan ng halagang 8,000 na gift certificate. Pero para sa akin, malaking bagay na po yun. Kaya nagpapasalamat po ako kay Pangulong Duterte, lalo sa DTI, dahil meron silang program na para sa pangkabuhayan. Programang pangkabuhayan sa pagbangon at ginhawa. Kaya yung pong nakuha ko na 8,000, binili ko agad po yon ng mga paninda. Yung mga panindang mabiling-mabili. Dahil pag oras na nabili yon, pwede ko po pong maibili uli ng panibagong paninda. Kaya maraming salamat po. Talagang mabait ang Panginoong Diyos pag talagang nangangailangan ng isang tao. Talagang pagkakaloob sa iyo, ora mismo, hindi na makabot ang 1 taon. Yung araw din yon, natanggap po ang 8,000. Maraming po salamat sa inyo.
Maraming salamat, Ms. Rosario Santos, and God bless to you and your family. The Philippine archipelago is prone to typhoons and other natural calamities. Hence, under the Duterte administration, preparation for disasters have always been essential in ensuring that less people are affected and urgent rehabilitation efforts are implemented. To present the legacies on climate change adaptation and mitigation and disaster risk reduction, let us put our hands together for the Department of Environment and Natural Resources Acting Secretary Jim Sampulna.
Thank you, Juan Carlos. To Executive Secretary Salvador Vidaldea, all cabinet members, and to our guests and participants, I forgot to mention the member of the Diplomatic Corps. Isang mga kalikasang umaga po sa ating lahat. Climate change is no longer a far-off threat. During the Duterte administration, The extent of climate crisis was experienced by our people, our environment, and our natural resources. Ladies and gentlemen, the Cabinet Cluster on Climate Change Adaptation, Mitigation, and Disaster Risk Reduction face these challenges head-on.
The challenges we face. Extreme storms like typhoons Rolly, Ulysses, Odette, and Agaton have become frequent manifestations of climate change that our country has braved in recent years. And the Duterte administration came in at a time which is a turning point for tackling climate change and disaster risks. From 2018 to 2021, the government immediately provided the victims of typhoons and earthquakes with relief assistance worth more than 2 billion pesos. Climate Action Pathway has drawn and implemented to minimize exposure to climate and non-climate hazards and enhance resilience and adaptive capacity of the ecosystems and vulnerable communities. Strong typhoons, massive flooding, volcanic eruption, earthquakes. The Duterte administration remains steadfast. Tunay na katatagan ang ipinamalas ng ating pamahalaan.
Protecting nature and its essential services to people is not negotiable. Boracay Island was closed for rehabilitation. 6 months after its closure, it's no longer accessible, and now back to its pristine state. The impossible cleanup of Manila Bay was confronted. A new, vibrant Manila Bay can now be enjoyed by everyone. Moratorium on coal project was imposed. Ambitious goal on reduction of greenhouse gas emission was committed. The Duterte administration espoused that a healthy environment is the foundation for economic and social development. Labis na malasakit ang ipinadama para sa kalikasan, para sa mamamayan. The Duterte administration devoted its policies, programs, and resources to foster sustainable future for every Filipino. Building climate resilience for affected communities by disasters and climate hazard was strengthened. The task force Build Back Better, created under Executive Order 120 issued by the President, undertook efforts to address perennial flooding in the areas of Cagayan, Bicol, and Marikina River basins. Integrated watershed management through bamboo planting along riverbanks was carried out as part of flood mitigation efforts. Phase 1 of dredging in the Magapit, Daros, Cagayan, and Marikina rivers had been completed, while the removal of critical sandbars restricting the water flows of Cagayan River, Marikina, and Bicol River is ongoing. The Cash for Work program greatly benefited the number of beneficiaries through food security and environmental protection activities. The quick response during calamities was strengthened for relief assistance to poor individuals living in hazard-prone areas and victims of typhoons and earthquake nationwide. Emergency Operations Center in 17 regional offices and the National Disaster Risk Reduction and Management Operations Centers were established as command control point for emergency operations and activities. Transformative action to halt and reverse nature loss were invigorated. More collaborative ways through program convergence budgeting were enhanced to ensure synergy of efforts and funding among national government agencies and local governments of climate vulnerable provinces. renewable energy and low-carbon public transport system were actively promoted, especially with the recent passage of Republic Act 11697 for the Electric Vehicle Industry Development Act. Proper waste management and alternative climate resilient livelihoods were bolstered to relieve pressure on environment and biodiversity. Regulation on healthcare waste transporters and treatment, storage, and disposal facilities were enhanced to improve healthcare waste management. Over 1,000 local governments and stakeholders were trained on the management of household healthcare waste and special waste and the development of COVID-19 related waste management plans. To improve the air quality in the Philippines, the monitoring, enforcement, and policy issuance of compliance of vehicles and industries to emission standards were intensified. To mitigate the impact of climate change, reduce risk, and prevent soil erosion and runoff, the enhanced national greening program, including the development of bamboo plantation, is vigorously implemented. Recording another victory for the planet, the Philippines joined various countries in pushing for the phase down of unabated coal power and the end of inefficient fuel fossil subsidies during the 26th Conference of Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Marine protected area networks were established and strengthened. Coastal communities were supported with biodiversity-friendly and social enterprises. Sustainable agricultural practices were mainstreamed in and around protected areas and in wider agricultural landscape nationwide. During the pandemic, 407.6 million pesos of the Social Development Management Program of the mining companies were realigned to support the affected impact and non-impact communities. An estimated 2.7 billion pesos were also committed to environmental program on top of the 8.1 million seedlings and reforestation of 6,600 hectares of mine out and for mining forest program. Proactively promoting responsible mining in the country, Phase 1 and 2 of the mining audit, thank you from Department of Finance, covering 43 large-scale surface metallic mining companies have been completed. Supporting quality infrastructures to ensure resilience against extreme weather events and other hazards was facilitated. Flood mitigating program through flood risk management project, improvements of tide embankments, construction of channel improvements, construction of bridges, and repair of sluice gates along low-lying areas have also been strengthening the resilience of communities to hydrometeorological hazard. Coastal infrastructures are also being pursued in partnership with development agency to enhance the resilience of coastal communities against disaster. Innovation and technology to improve knowledge and forecasting and readiness for calamities were fortified. State-of-the-art technologies were installed to improve monitoring, forecasting capability, and tracking of weather disturbances, flood disaster mitigation, and earthquake detectability. LGUs were supported with continuous updating of geohazard maps and in the conduct of risk assessment in their areas to help them plan for disaster and calamities. Proactive advocacy program on Operation Listo to strengthen disaster preparedness of LGUs using the whole of government approach was put in place. The communities and households are being engaged in capacity development on early preparedness action to ensure adaptive and disaster-resilient barangays. Game management plan to guide the county towards climate resilience were developed, enabling science-based decision-making in the country. The Philippine Water Supply and Sanitation Master Plan, Philippine Action Plan for Sustainable Consumption and Production, roadmap to institutionalize natural capital accounting in the Philippines, and rehabilitation and recovery planning guide have been developed as we address climate change, disaster risk, biodiversity loss, and pollution. The Duterte administration shaped the vision of the strategy of our country to improve lives, protect the people and the environment, consistent with global aspiration for a better, greener, bluer, and healthier post-COVID-19 recovery. The Duterte administration continues to harness the development of trajectories that are sustainable, inclusive, and resilient. Ito ang kinabukasan ng ating titiyakin para sa bawat Pilipino. Kailangan may pagpatuloy para sa tuloy-tuloy pagbabago. Isang mainit na pasasalamat at pagpupugay sa lahat ng bumubuo ng Cabinet Cluster on Climate Change, Adaptation, Mitigation, and Disaster Risk Reduction. Mabuhay ang Pilipinas! Mabuhay ang sambayanang Pilipino! Mabuhay si Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte!
Diyan lang po kami sa kabilang street, sa Riverside. Kaya lang po kami lumipat dito kasi once po na may bagyo, nangangamba kami lagi dahil po sa pabilis na pagtaas ng tubig. Ulysses po ang matinding karanasan. Yung mga gamit na po namin ay na-wash out lahat. Hanggang second floor po ang tubig. Lagi lang kami natataranta, nangangamba kami kung saan kami pupunta, nangangamba kami dahil sa mga gamit namin.
Bilang sagot sa mga sakuna na dulot ng mga paha, ay binuo ang Task Force Build Back Better.
Ang Task Force Build Back Better is malaking tulong para sa amin residente ng Marikina kasi po yan ay project dredging ng riverbank po. Ngayon po ay kampante na po kami dahil po sa isang legacy project po ng riverbank. Nagkaroon kami ng bagong pag-asa.
Nagka-start kami ng amo sa NGP, sa National Greening Program, 2016 sa panahon na ni President Duterte. Sa Bakawan amo diri ma'am, dako ang karadyo ang tabang ng NGP, ang isa sa mga nakahatag sa amo nan mga trabaho or nakahatag ng dugang income sa mga tao. Sa nananamo ma'am turismo, noon lad sab no taas ang turismo diri sa amo, dagan kayong mga turismo ang mukanhi tungod sa among mga kabakawan. Ang Bakawan ma'am ang naghatag ng proteksyon sa amo na naton bagyong Odette. Kay kung wala pa ang Bakawan diri sa amo, Siguro dako gajud karadyaw ang damage na mahitabo or lagmit pa ang mga tao, mga matay compared man dito sa mga iban nga nalungsod dito sa dinhi sa Siargao nga walay gajud bakhaw.
Sa ating mahal na Pangulo, maraming salamat po sa pagtulong niyo sa amin. Mga nakakaranas kami sa mga disaster po. Sa ngayon po ay ang tubig po ay tuloy-tuloy na pagdaloy. Hindi po nag-i-stack na sa bawat lugar na catch basin na tinatawag natin dito sa Marikina.
So nagpasalamat gajud kami karadyaw kan President Duterte sa itataghatag na mga proyekto sa amo kay nakapadugang nan kaugmaanan pangita sa mga tao, then siguridad na amo mga pagkaon.
All the way from Siargao, let us welcome on stage the CCAM beneficiary, Ms. Judy Areza.
Sa lahat po ng ating mga opisyal at kawani ng ating pamahalaan, mga kapwa benepisyaryo at kapwa Pilipino, isang magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Nagpapasalamat po ang aming komunidad dahil kami po ay naging bahagi ng okasyong ito na makapagbahagi ng aming pagpapatunay sa legaseya ng ating pamahalaan. Ako po si Judilyn Donoso Areza ng Siargao Island. Ako po ay kalihim ng Del Carmen Fisherfolk Association o Del Cafea, isang people's organization po na bahagi ng Enhanced National Greening Program sa Siargao. Ang aming pong asosasyon ay nabuo noong 2011. Naging party po kami o bahagi ng Enhanced National Greening Program noong taong 2016 sa panahon ng ating Pangulong Duterte. Nagpapasalamat po kami sa mga programa ng ating pamahalaan dahil kami po ay nabigyan ng trabaho at dagdag na kita ang aming komunidad. Ang aming pong komunidad ay umaasa po ang aming ikabubuhay sa mga bakawan, kung saan marami ang masagana ang dami ng isda at sa mga turista na bumibisita sa aming lugar. Sa marami pong mga pagsubok na dumaan sa aming komunidad, ang aming pong hindi po kami nawala ng pag-asa dahil ang Enhanced National Greening Program po ng ating pamahalaan ay nagbigay sa amin ng tulong. Kumikita po kami ng halos 3,600 na dagdag kita kada buwan at kung minsan pa nga po ay tuwing bakasyon kami po ay kumikita ng hanggang 1,000 kada araw. Dumating po si Bagyong Odette. Natakot po talaga kami nung panahon na yun dahil napakalakas po ng hangin. Na ang akala namin po ay halos mamatay na kaming lahat. Halos lahat po ng mga kabahayan doon ay nasira. Lahat po ng aming mga pagkakakitaan ay nawala dahil wala na pong mga mahuhuling isda at wala na rin pong mga turista na dumating sa aming lugar. Malaki po ang pasasalamat namin sa aming mga bakawan dahil sa binigay nitong proteksyon sa amin noong kasagsagan ng bagyo. Kung hindi po dahil sa aming mga bakawan, siguro po talaga ay maraming namatay o lahat po talaga malaki po ang pinsala na aming natamo nung kasagsagan ng bagyo. Kaya po, unti-unti pa lang po kaming umaahon sa epekto ng pandemya, panibagong dagok muli ang aming hinarap. Pero hindi po kami nawala ng pag-asa dahil ang ating pong gobyerno o pamahalaan ay nasa aming tabi. Kasama naming umaahon at patuloy po na suporta ng ating pamahalaan sa aming mga kabuhayan sa pagbibigay ng mga pananim, pangmintina at proteksyon, mga pagsasanay upang kami ay muling makabangon at patuloy na makaahon ng mas matatag at higit na matibay. Lubos po ang aming pasasalamat sa ating Pangulong Duterte at sa kanyang mga gabinete. Mabuhay po kayong lahat at makakaasa po kayong patuloy pong magpapakatatag ang aming komunidad para sa maunlad na kinabukasan. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you, Ms. Judy Areza. Now, JC, we are halfway through the program, and I can see that everyone is enjoying our working lunch, right? It looks good. You know, it's been really amazing to see how each agency has strived to help improve the lives of our fellow Filipinos.
That's right, Daphne. Truly an impressive slew of accomplishments, and we're only in the first half of day one of 2 days of good news that this administration is about to share. Talagang tatak Duterte, and please give a round of applause to all of our secretaries who have reported their good news so far this morning.
Okay, I think we have some reminders for social media.
That's right, Daphne. Please don't forget, post on social media. Use the official hashtags, hashtag Duterte Legacy, hashtag Pamana ng Pagbabago, and hashtag Tapang at Malasakit, as well as don't forget to tag and follow at Duterte.Legacy at PCOO.gov and PCOO Global Media on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to see more of our government's accomplishments and legacies.
Of course, we're also broadcasting live on the PCOO Global page in Facebook. Now let's move on to another cluster. Citizen participation in governmental processes is essential. Hence, the national government strengthens programs that can easily be felt down to the grassroots level. To walk us through the legacies on participatory governance, let us give a big hand for Interior and Local Government Secretary Eduardo Año.
Sa mga kapwa ko lingkod bayan, sa ating mga katuwang mula sa iba't ibang sektor ng lipunan, at sa lahat ng ating mga kababayan, magandang tanghali po sa inyong lahat. Sa mga mamamayang aktibo sa pakikilahok sa pamahalaan, mga Pilipinong pinakikinggan ang hinaing at pangangailangan, isang pamahalaang mabilis na tumutugon sa kanilang mga pangangailangan at nagbibigay ng sapat na serbisyo. Ito ang kwento ng nakaraang 6 na taon kung saan ang pamahalaan ng Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte ay ginawang katuwang ang ating mga mamamayang Pilipino sa pamamahala at paglutas ng kanilang mga suliranin at ng iba't ibang usapin sa bansa. Sa pamamagitan ng Participatory Governance Cluster, binigyang buhay at isinakatuparan natin ang pangako ng Pangulong Duterte na isang pamahalaang may tapang at malasakit kung saan sentro at katuwang ang mga Pilipino sa paghubog at pagtatatag ng isang mahusay, matapat at malinis na pamamahala. Sa umpisa pa lamang ng termino ng Pangulo noong 2016 ay inilahad na niya ang kanyang matibay na hangaring palakasin ang ugnayan ng ating pamahalaan at ng mga mamamayan tungo sa tapat at epektibong pamamahala. The last 6 years also saw various national government agencies work hand in hand, collaborate with each other, and reach out to the citizenry in order to hear their concerns and ensure that those concerns are adequately and immediately addressed. Indeed, democracy reached its peak during the term of the President when people's needs were heard and addressed, and they were made part of improving their own lives and in charting their future. People's participation in governance was neither a slogan nor an empty promise. It was a fruitful and truthful reality this time. The agencies that comprise the Participatory Governance Cluster, led by the DILG, together with the Department of Budget and Management, the offices of the Executive Secretary and Cabinet Secretary, Presidential Communications Operations Office, Presidential Legislative Liaison Office, and the Presidential Management Staff, the Department of Justice, Department of Trade and Industry, National Economic and Development Authority, and the Commission on Higher Education, Department of Finance, and the National Anti-Poverty Commission work in unison to implement governance reforms to enhance transparency and accountability in government and ensure effective public service in partnership with the people. Mahalaga na marinig ang boses ng ating mga taong bayan upang higit na mapabuti ang paghahatid ng serbisyo ng pamahalaan. Sa pamamagitan ng hotline 8888, inaksyonan natin ang reklamo ng mga ordinaryong mamamayan sa mga ahensya ng pamahalaan na hindi nakakapagbigay ng tamang serbisyo sa kaukulang panahon. Sa katunayan, mahigit 2.2 milyong reklamo na ang natanggap at natugunan ng kinaukulang mga ahensya simula 2018 hanggang 2021. At naging daan din ito upang mabawasan ang red tape o korupsyon sa mga ahensya ng pamahalaan. Marami rin tayong natulungang mga kababayan sa pamamagitan ng Emergency 911 hotline na nagsilbing linya ng taong bayan upang ating matugunan ang kanilang mga agarang pangangailangan, anumang uri ng kalamidad, aksidente, kapinsalaan o trahedya ang kanilang kaharapin. Malaki rin ang ginampanan ng Daguao Town Hall meetings na isinagawa natin sa iba't ibang panig ng bansa upang lubos na ilapit sa mamamayan ang pamahalaan, makinig sa kanilang mga hinaing at magkasamang hanapan ng katugunan at lunas ang kanilang mga suliranin. Minsan pa ay pinatunayan natin na ang ating pamahalaan ay hindi lamang nakikinig, bagkus ay binibigyan ng pansin at tugon ang mga hinaing at pangangailangan ng pangkaraniwang mamamayan sa tulong ng mga civil society organizations. Sa gitna ng pandemya, ipinagpatuloy natin ang Daguao upang mas lalong patatagin ang tiwala at ugnayan ng pamahalaan at ng mamamayan. Higit pa nating pinaigting ang participatory governance noong simulan nating ipatupad ang kampanya na naglalayong tuldukan na ang komunismo at insurensiya na 5 dekada nang nag-aasik ng kasinungalingan, takot at terorismo, lalo na sa mga mamamayang naninirahan sa mga conflict-affected communities. Through the implementation of the Retooled Community Support Program, we gathered all sectors of the local community, listened to their needs, concerns, and aspirations, and provided them the response they wanted from our government, the right funding and projects for their needs. Our support to the Barangay Development Program is a living testament that genuinely listens to our people's needs and aspirations in life and actually cares for them. Mahalaga rin ang pagtutulungan ng mamamayan at ng lokal na pamahalaan sa pagtugon ng usapin ng iligal na droga, kriminalidad at insurensiya upang mapanatiling ang kapayapaan at seguridad ng bawat pamilyang Pilipino. Sa tulong at pakikilahok ng mamamayan, lalong lumakas ang ating mga local peace and order councils, ang anti-drug abuse councils na nagbigay daan sa mas mapayapa at ligtas na mga pamayanan. Hindi lamang bumaba ang bilang ng mga krimen at kaguluhan sa bansa. Naiwaksi din natin ang mga posibleng banta sa kapanatagan at kaunlaran ng ating bayan. Our efforts were felt and lauded by the people, and we are even recognized globally as we made it to the top 50 countries in Gallup's Feeling Safe survey to ensure transparency and accountability in government. The President directed all government agencies under the executive branch to ensure public access to information. As of today, 61,903 requests through the Freedom of Information portal have been responded to by concerned agencies, a manifestation of the government's commitment to operationalize the people's right to information. Our local governments are also being monitored on how they manage and utilize public funds. We are likewise working on the immediate passage of the Freedom of Information Bill to cover all the 3 branches of government to bring greater transparency on public transactions and documents. Kabilang sa prioridad ng DILG ay ang pagpapanagot sa mga lokal na opisyal na sangkot sa mga iligal na gawain. Korupsyon, paglabag o hindi pagtalima sa mga direktiba at polisiya ng pamahalaan. At sa pagtugon naman sa COVID-19 pandemic, ang mga bagay na ito ay nagawa natin sa pakikipagtulungan ng ating mga kababayan na nanatiling mapagbantay at mapagmatsyag upang maiwasan ang pag-aabuso sa kapangyarihan at masiguro na tapat at responsable ang bawat opisyal ng pamahalaan sa kanilang sinumpaang tungkulin. People clamored for better government service and a government that listens. Government responded by speeding up transactions and extending validity of certain government-issued documents. Under this administration, the validity of passports and the driver's license were extended from 3 or 5 years to 10 years. The government also pursued efforts to lessen the red tape through streamlining its processes for permits and licenses for new businesses, renewal of business and permits, and the construction of telecommunication towers. Ang ganitong serbisyo ay nakakapagdulot ng malaking ginhawa at tulong sa ating mga kababayan sa pag-usbong ng kaunlaran at bawat sulok ng ating bansa. Upang lalo pang mapabuti ang kalidad at maitaas ang antas ng serbisyo ng gobyerno, ipinatupad simula ngayong taon na ito ang ang tinatawag nating Mandanas-Garcia ruling ng Korte Suprema na siyang magbibigay ng karagdagang pondo sa ating mga pamahalang lokal upang makamit at magamit sa mga proyekto at serbisyong nakalaan sa ating mga kababayan. The issuance of Executive Number 138 paved the way for the operationalization of the said Supreme Court ruling, which required the national and local government to prepare their respective devolution transition plans to ensure that government services are felt and responsive to the needs of the people in the communities. Malaki ang paniniwala natin na ang inilatag nating pagpapalaga at pagbibigay kapangyarihan at boses sa karaniwang mamamayan ay magbubunsod sa mas maayos at mabungang partnership sa pagitan ng mga pinunong lokal at mga tao na siya titiyak na maayos, mahusay na pamamahala at paghahatid ng serbisyo publiko to further enhance the standard of good governance and effective public service delivery. We continuously scaled up the Seal of Good Local Governance or SGLG, and to make it effective as possible in measuring the performance of our local government units. The enactment of the SGLG law in 2019 is a proof of government's responsiveness to the people's clamor for results-oriented and people-centered governance. Ilan lamang ang aking mga nabanggit sa mga inisyatibo at reformang tunay na masasabi nating legacy ni Pangulong Duterte. Subalit, mas magiging ramdam natin ang aking mga sinabi kung mismong ang ating mga mamamayan ang magsasabi kung ano ang naging pagbabago na idinulot ng participatory governance sa kanilang pang-araw-araw na buhay. Kaya mamaya ay anyayahan natin si Ginoong June Palmares, ang punong barangay ng Batasan, San Jose Occidental, Mindoro, upang ibahagi sa atin ang karanasan at mga nakuhang benepisyo dulot ng ating mga programa. Alam kong marami pang hamon na darating sa ating bansa sa hinaharap. Ngunit malinaw, ang natatanging solusyon ay ang ating patuloy na pagbubuklod upang palakasin ang ating pamamahala. Tiwala ako at ang aking mga kasamahan sa PGC na maipagpapatuloy natin ito tungo sa pagtataguyod ng maunlad at mapayapang Pilipinas. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay ang sambayanang Pilipino. Sa panahon ni Pangulong Duterte, pinaigting natin ang pagsulong ng whole of nation approach, pagpapalawig ng people's participation o participatory governance sa lahat ng antas at aspeto ng pamamahala upang maging akma ang programa ng pamahalaan sa mga pangangailangan ng mga tao.
Naging parte kami. Ang unang project namin, yung sa electrification. Malaking bagay po para sa amin bilang taga-barangay Tungdol dahil po, kunyari may bagyo na dumarating, malaking tulong po yung liwanag na galing sa solar. Pangalawa, yung aming access road to Busay Falls kasi nilagyan na sila ng kalsada papuntang bundok. Kaya mas madali po ang pagbaba ng mga produkto.
Ang lahat ay may boses. Ang lahat ay pwede mag-participate para tiyakin na ang palisiya, ang serbisyo, ang pagsagot sa mga problema ay naaayon sa pangangailangan ng mga mamamayan.
Noon po na hindi pa ginawa to, tuwing umulan po, sobrang takot na po ako. Kasi yung bahay namin malapit po sa tubig. Tapos, siyempre, pag nagbabaha na, ang mga estudyante hindi na po makadaan dito. Kasi lampas na po ang tubig doon.
So dati talaga, kunting ulang baha na dyan. Kaya yun ang kinasa namin para magawa niyang paraan, yung box culvert yan. So ngayon nung kahit malakas ng ulan, hindi na bumabaha doon. Sa water system po, kaya yung pinasa rin namin para makaiwas naman ang mga tao sa mangog na magkaroon sila ng sakit na system. Delikado naman talaga yung sakit na yun. So ngayon, gumagana na yung water system, doon na sila umiinom. Malaking tulong niya sa amin, lalo na sa kabarangay ko, mga taga-guro yan.
At sa pamamagitan ng good and participatory governance, ay ilalapit namin ng gobyerno sa mga tao upang maramdaman ng mga Pilipino ang tunay na tapang at malasakit natin para sa kanila.
Malaking tulong po ito para sa amin dahil po, kumpara dati na wala pa yung project na yon, talagang kakaiba. Kumbaga, hindi progresibo yung aming barangay. So ngayon na nagkaroon kami ng project, mas maganda para sa amin.
Kaya kung wala po talaga siya, ewan ko lang anong taon pa magagawa to. Kasi ilang taon po ako dito, walang taon po, ngayon lang nagawa. Yung Pangulong Duterte po, salamat po dahil kung hindi po siya naging presidente, hindi po nagawa to.
Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it from our beneficiary, Mr. June Palmares from Occidental Mindoro.
Sa ating mahal na Pangulo, Presidente Rodrigo Duterte, DILG Secretary Eduardo M. Año, sa lahat ng mga panauhin at mamamayang saksi sa okasyong ito, magandang umaga po. Sa salitang mangyan, perya, payag, marun. Ako po si Barangay Captain June Palmares mula sa Barangay Batasan, San Jose Occidental. Ang pangunahing hanap buhay sa aming lugar ay ang pagsasaka ng palay, mais, sibuyas, gulay at bawang. Napakaganda po ng NTF-LCAC sa aming barangay. Kami po ang kinonsulta at nagpasya kung ano ang nararapat sa aming ikabubuti. At napagtuunan namin ng pansin ang pagpapalawig ng edukasyon sa ating mga katutubong mangyan upang lumalim ang kanilang pananaw na sila ang tanggap ng lipunan at kinakalinga ng ating pamahalaan. Sa ngayon, ay hindi sila basta-basta maakit o malalansi ng may mga sasamang intensyon maging ang mga damuong o mga hindi mangyan ay makikinabang din sa parehong paraan. Lubos ang aming pasasalamat sa 4 milyon pesos na inilaan sa edukasyon na tulungan ang mga mag-aaral at guro sa aming barangay na magkaroon ng isang classroom o 3 classroom building. Iisa lang po ang high school sa aming lugar na extension pa ng National High School sa malayong barangay sentral. Dati-dati, classroom lang ang nagagamit ng mga barangay sa ikatlo. Sana magkaroon ng makeshift classroom lamang na donated pa ng PTA na nasira ng bagyong Ursula. Bago dumating ang proyekto ng LCAC, nakikigamit lang sa Batasan Elementary School ang ibang estudyante ng high school na karamihan ay katutubong mangyan. Malaking kaalwanan ang naitulong ng 4 million pesos LCAC project para maiwasan ang pagsisiksikan lalo na sa panahon ng pandemya. Ang nasimento pinailawang kalsada tungo sa paaralan ay nakatulong din sa mga mag-aaral sa kanila malayo ngunit matiwasay na paglalakbay. Mangyan at di mangyan, buong barangay ay nagkaroon ng pag-asa at paninindigan na ang mga kabataan ay mapanuto, malayo sa masasamang bisyo at impluensya, lalo't higit magkakaroon ng kasanayang magpagbabago ang kanilang kagandahan, maghanap buhay, tulong sa edukasyon. Sa mga proyekto ng LCAC, nabibigyan din ng ibang sektor ng barangay. Dati po, ang malaking abala sa aming residente, ang masamang kalagayan ng aming kalsada, farm to market road. Lubak-lubak po, maalikabok sa tag-araw, binabaha at malalim ang putik, pagsapit ng tag-ulan. Hirap po ang mga magsasaka naming maglabas ng produkto, ganon din ang iba pang mamamayan na nangailangan ng tulong papunta sa bayan o sa ospital. Kaya taos-puso kaming nagpapasalamat sa pamahalaan at sa LCAC project na dumating. Tinulungan kaming maayos, may pasimento ang malaking bahagi ng kalsada sa halagang 15 million pesos. Napakaganda po sa kanilang pagkagagawa at madaling may biyahe ang aming mga produkto papuntang kabayanan kahit naka-tricycle lang. Ganon din ang mga pasyente na papuntang ospital ay mabilis at komportable ng makakarating. Bukod pa riyan, nagliwanag ang aming barangay sa 150 solar street lights na may pondong 1 million pesos. Napayapa ang kalooban ng mga mamamayan pagkaalis ng mga panganib na nagtatago sa dilim, maging maliwalas at maliwanag na po ang aming barangay kahit na gabi. Kitang-kita ang kagandahan, kaayusan ng barangay. Dahil sa solar street light, madaling araw pa lang nakakatungo na sa bukid ang mga magsasaka. Muli, ang Barangay Batasan ay taus-pusong nagpapasalamat sa Pangulong Duterte, sa pamunuan ng DILG, sa mga namumuno sa LCAC project. Mas mahimbing na po kaming nakakatulog sa gabi, knowing totoong may malasakit ang gobyerno sa mga mamamayan. Sana po may pagpatuloy pa ang ganitong project sa mga susunod pang taon. Pagpalain nawa tayo lahat ng poong may kapal. Fadi po.
Thank you so much, Mr. Jun Palmares. And now we've heard from the legacies on participatory governance. Now, poverty alleviation and distribution of social services to Filipinos are programs where the national government consistently allocates a large sum of budget. Moving on to the legacies on human development and poverty reduction, let's call on the Department of Social Welfare and Development Secretary, Rolando Bautista.
My colleagues in the Cabinet, headed by Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea, members of the Diplomatic Corps, beneficiaries of various government programs and services, fellow civil servants, our media friends, ladies and gentlemen, a pleasant afternoon to all. In the last State of the Nation address of President Rodrigo Duterte, he said, and I quote, "We need to make every public servant responsive to the needs of the people and enjoin every Filipino to assert their right to demand malasakit from their leaders until everyone lives with dignity, well-fed, educated, healthy, secure, disciplined, and empowered to contribute to national development," unquote. As the chairperson of the Human Development and Poverty Reduction Cluster, or Sdprc, all 37 member agencies have upheld the President's directive that malasakit or compassion shall prevail and guide us in crafting policies and programs for the benefit of the Filipino people. The Sdprc was created for a specific purpose, which is to improve the quality of life of our kababayans through a broad-based and inclusive approach to public service delivery. In the 6 years of this administration, the government earnestly followed the 0 to 10-point socio-economic agenda as directed by President Duterte. Because of this, we celebrated the significant decrease in poverty incidence from 23.5% in 2015 down to 16.7% in 2018, according to the Philippine Statistics Authority Family Income and Expenditure Survey. Despite this notable success, the poverty incidence, unfortunately, rose up to 18% in 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This is why the Sdprc worked doubly hard to reach out to the poor, vulnerable, and marginalized Filipinos, and intensified its programs and services through institutionalization of social development efforts, strengthening of convergence programs, and continuous development of high-impact initiatives to alleviate poverty and promote positive social change. This afternoon, let me share with you some of the stories of triumphs achieved by the Sdprc as the lead partner of Filipinos in achieving social development through its 4 major strategies, namely education as central strategy, advancing and protecting public health, enhancing social protection, and building capacities and creating opportunities. The Duterte administration believes that education is the ultimate key to the upward social mobility of Filipinos. Hence, the government invested in learning and development projects. We produced the first batch of K-12 program with 1.2 million graduates in school year 2017 to 2018. In addition, despite the challenges brought to our educational system by the COVID-19 pandemic, in school year 2020 to 2021, we achieved 80% of our enrollment target amidst the pandemic with 26.6 million enrollees under the alternative delivery mode. At the outcome level, graduates of the K-12 program gained better employment opportunities. Furthermore, under the free higher education program, we have supported more than 1.9 million students. Having these measures in place helped stabilize our education system in the midst of adversity. National progress will not be complete without ensuring that our citizenry is healthy, especially mothers and their children. Early pregnancy, early marriages, and repeated pregnancies are being addressed. Around 225,000 adolescents, more than 15,000 adults, and 44,900 teachers and service providers benefited from the Adolescent Health and Development Program. Further, we reached 6.8 million couples and individuals to the Responsible Parenthood and Family Planning Program. With the issuance of Executive Order Number 141, the cluster formulated a comprehensive action plan to prevent adolescent pregnancies in the Philippines 2021 to 2024, outlining the monitoring and evaluation framework of cluster initiatives pursuant to this undertaking. We have also doubled our efforts in vaccination, administering 151 million COVID-19 vaccines. On the area of nutrition, through the Interagency Task Force on Zero Hunger, we were able to coordinate and harmonize programs from 15 agencies to address issues on malnutrition. As such, the supplementary feeding programs serve around 1.8 million children every year. With these efforts, we have ensured that our children and youth will grow up healthy individuals who will take active part in nation building. In order to reduce poverty and vulnerability, the following have been undertaken by this administration. The institutionalization of the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program, or PORPIS, came into fruition with the passage of Republic Act Number 11310. This resulted to around 830,000 self-sufficient households who are ready to exit from the program. We have also facilitated 1.4 million children graduating from high school and 32,500 finishing college. Ang tulong panghanap buhay sa ating disadvantaged displaced workers or TUPAD provides emergency employment to 6.8 million beneficiaries, utilizing a total amount of 32.9 billion pesos. In adherence to the Bayanihan 1 and 2, the largest social amelioration program in the history of the country, mitigated the socio-economic effects brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. Around 23 million families were supported with 195.4 billion pesos worth of assistance. These endeavors have guaranteed that no one will be left behind, especially those who have been hit by unemployment due to the unprecedented pandemic. For our last strategy, we invested in the backbone of the Philippine economy, which is agriculture. Thus, the Duterte administration opened up opportunities for our farmers and fisherfolk. Through the National Rice Program, we were able to distribute a total of 28.2 million kilos of hybrid seeds to 1.4 million rice farmers and 77 million kilos of inbred seeds to 1.2 million beneficiaries. Various loan facilities are also being implemented that aim to empower marginalized and small farmers and fisherfolk, and farmers and fisheries organizations as well. A total of 2.3 billion pesos worth of loans were released to around 66,000 borrowers. These are just some of the efforts diligently done by the Sdprc. While the administration's term ends on 30 of June, I am confident that the Duterte legacy shall live on to the millions of lives it has touched and transformed. As the Greek political thinker Pericles said, and I quote, "What you leave behind is not what you engrave in stone monuments, but what is woven into the lives of others." Unquote. We thank the people and stakeholders who trusted and supported the President and his cabinet for extending all the help they can give to make the Philippines a better place to live in. Our whole-of-nation approach indeed has shown us what the true spirit of Bayanihan can do for our country. Most of all, thank you, President Duterte, for giving us the opportunity to serve the Filipino nation by carrying out executive branch mandates. Your ardent love for the country is truly felt in your leadership. That is why, despite calamities, crises, and even the COVID-19 pandemic, we are inspired and passionate about fulfilling our duties no matter the hurdles that come our way. Mabuhay ang Team Duterte, mabuhay ang Republika ng Pilipinas.
Noong una, talagang mahirap lang kami. Pinasok ko lahat na trabaho, tulad ng welding, pagka-carpenter, pangingisda. Nagdadrive pa ako ng habal-habal. Ginawa kong lahat pang matustusan ko ang pangailangan ng aking pamilya.
Ang asawa ko ay walang regular na trabaho. Hanggang nakabuo kami ng 3 anak. Doon lalong naghirap. Kasi hindi na sapat ang kinikita ng aking asawa.
Pag nagugutom kami, wala kaming makain. Ang hirap, pag sa paaralan namin, kailangan namin ng baon, kailangan namin ng pambayad, walang-wala talaga.
Patuloy na binibigyang prioridad ng DSWD ang may taas ang antas ng kalagayan ng mahihirap. Kabilang dito ang Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program o For Peace, ang pangunahing programa ng kagawaran kontra kahirapan. May tuturing na isang mahalagang pamana ang programa. Dahil dito, laging may nakalaan na pondo ang programa, may pagtaas ng halaga ng tulong pampinasyal at mga nakalatag na pamantayan sa pagpapatupad ng For Peace.
Malaki talaga itong naitulong dahil meron na akong katuwang sa mga gastusin ko sa bahay. Yung anak ko may education grant na at may pangkalusugan grant. Meron pang rice subsidy at meron pang UCT sa bawat buwan ay 300.
Simula yung nasali ang Pamilyang Bini sa Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program at napili huwarang pamilya, malaki ang naitulong niya, lalo na sa mga kabarangay niya. Nakikita ng mga kapitbahay nila na hindi talaga sinayang yung lahat na natanggap nila sa For Peace.
Malaking pasasalamat namin na kami ang kaniyang nasilip dahil sa aming nagawa sa komunidad. Dahil dito malaki ang nabago sa aking pamumuhay.
Sobrang saya ko talaga. Kabuti pala talaga itong programang For Peace. Kaya maraming salamat Pangulong Duterte, ipagpatuloy niya ang nasimulan niyang legacy. Dahil napakaganda na programa. Maraming mga Pilipinong mahirap na mas makinabang pa dito.
Ladies and gentlemen, from Zamboanga del Sur, HDRPC beneficiary, Mr. Rolando Bines.
Sa lahat po ng bumubuo sa administrasyong ito, lalo na sa kagalang-galang na ama ng ating bayan, na kapwa ko, Tubong Mindanao. Ang ating pinakamamahal na Presidente Rodrigo Roa Duterte. At gayon din sa ating DSWD Secretary Rolando Joseleto Bautista. Sa inyong lahat, magandang araw po. Ako po si Rolando Apat Bines, ang ama ng huwarang pamilya na may 3 anak. Ang asawa ko po ay si Annalyn Labang Bines mula sa Barangay Tandubuay, Bayan ng San Pablo, Probinsya ng Zamboanga del Sur. Ako'y humaharap sa inyo upang ipabahagi ang kwento ng pag-asa mula nang ako'y matulungan ng ating pamahalaan sa pamamagitan ng purpose. Ako po ay isang mangingisda. Ang aking asawa ay nag-aalaga at tagapangasiwa ng aming munting tahanan. Ang aking kinikita ay hindi sapat para tustusan ang pangangailangan ng aking pamilya. Kahit kapos, pinag-aral pa rin namin ang aming pamilya. Hindi naging madali mamumuhay. At maraming pagkakataon na kami ay kinukulang. Kailangan talagang dumiskarte para mabuhay. Kaya nagpalipat-lipat ang aking trabaho. Nagmamaniho ako ng habal-habal, nagkakalpentero, nagmamason, nagwi-welding, nag-electrician. Lahat ata na trabaho ay napasukan ko. Dahil sa sipag, tinatawag nila akong Jack of all trades. Sa totoo po niyan, ako ay nakagraduate ng BSMT Nautical. Dahil sa sariling sikap, nagprosigi akong makatapos ng pag-aaral para makatulong sa iba at makaahon. Subalit, hindi po ako pinalad dahil colorblind ako. Ngunit kahit colorblind, prosigido akong mabigyan na makulay at maliwanag na kinabukasan ang aking pamilya. Noong taong 2009, dumating sa amin ang napakalasking blessing ng aming pamilya. Napasali po kami sa listahan ng mga benepisyaryo ng Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program o Purpose. Dito nagsimulang na bago ang takbo ng aking buhay. Nagkaroon ako ng karagdagan na pangtustos para mapaaral ang aking mga anak. Ang pang-araw-araw na gastusin, nakatulong din ito sa pag-alaga at sa kalusugan ng aking pamilya. Ang programang Purpose ay napakalaking halaga sa aming mahihirap na pamilya. Noon, ang aming bahay ay gawa lang ng sawali. Ngayon, kahit hindi pa natatapos, ay kahit papano, naging konkreto na. Dahil ito ay gawa namin nung dumating ang tulong mula DSWD. Maluwag-luwag na kami sa mga gastusin sa aming bahay. Taong 2019, napili ang aming pamilya bilang huwaran pantawid sa aming barangay. Nanalo kami sa municipal, province, regional contest hanggang nakarating kami sa national level. Bilang haligi ng pamilya, ng tahanan, hindi lamang ito karangalan ng aking sarili, kung hindi, karangalan ito ng buong pamilyang Bines. Dahil sa libo-libong miyembro ng Purpose, kami ang napili. Kaya proud na proud kami dito. Hindi ko masukat ang sobrang saya ng aking pamilya. Bilang pasasalamat, ako'y nangakong tulungan din ang kapwa. Ako'y magpapabuti sa aming barangay. Tumutulong na hindi humihingi ng kapalit sapagkat gusto kong maging mabuting halimbawa o ehemplo para sa aking mga anak. Sa inyong lahat, ako'y magpapaabot ng taus-pusong pasalamat, lalong-lalo na sa ating mahal na Presidente, sa pagsasabatas sa Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program. Saludo po ako sa inyong maayos na pamamahala. Hindi mo talaga kami binigo sa iyong pangako tungo sa maginhawa at panatag na buhay, Tatay Digong. Hiling kunawa na sa pamamagitan ng pagsasabatas nito, marami pang pamilya ang gaya namin na matulungan ng ating pamahalaan upang maiangat ang kanilang buhay, magkaroon ng kapanatagan at kalooban. Napakasaya pong gumising sa umaga na bawat umaga na may pag-asa. At ito ang pabaon ng ating administrasyon Duterte. Napakagandang ligasiya ito. Bilib na bilib talaga ako sa iyo, Presidente. Ang Ginoo magauban kanunay kanimo ug daghan kaayong salamat, Presidente Rodrigo Duterte, ang tatay ng bayan. Mabuhay po kayo!
Maraming salamat. Congratulations, Mr. Bines. Before anything else, we'd like to invite our friends and fellow partners of our agencies and media to please join the virtual presser that's to be hosted by our very own ASEC JV Arsena just after the program. And as we're inching closer to the conclusion of our day one of the Legacy Summit, once again, we'd like to remind our friends from the media and partner agencies to please join, same venue right here after the program, a virtual presser hosted by our ASEC JV Arsena. Also, we'd like to acknowledge the presence of our National Security Advisor, Hermogenes Esperon. Please give a round of applause to our National Security Advisor, Hermogenes Esperon. All right, we have been affected by, obviously, the pandemic for almost 2 years. Livelihoods were shaken, lives were lost, many fought hard to survive, and the Duterte administration has initiated for the majority of the Filipinos to be vaccinated against COVID-19. The government also provided social amelioration for those displaced by the pandemic. And the government continues its fight against the virus, and all of us must not let our guard down. On behalf of the National Task Force Chief Implementer and Vaccine SAR Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr., let us now call on Presidential Advisor for COVID-19 Response, Secretary Vince Dizon.
Magandang hapon po. Good afternoon, everyone. Talk is cheap. Actions speak louder than words. Results speak for themselves. These three very famous quotes, I think, best describe the character of the Duterte administration, led by no less than President Duterte and all of his cabinet members and officials under his administration. Alam niyo po, I was very fortunate to have worked with the economic team and the Build team for 5 years. And I can tell you that under the leadership of the President, under the leadership of Secretary Sani Dominguez, Secretary Art Tugade, former Secretary and now Senator-elect Mark Villar, and of course our dear Executive Secretary Bingbong Medialdea, no one exemplifies those three quotes than the economic team and the Build team. So please, let us give credit where credit is due. And these are men who exemplify the best of public service. Also, before I begin the presentation on behalf of Secretary Carlito Galvez, I think we need to also look back 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, at what struck not only the Philippines, but the entire world. A once-in-a-generation pandemic that brought even the richest and most powerful nations to their knees. The Philippines suffered for 2 years together with the entire world. But I dare say, if not for the bold, decisive, and swift action of the President and the likes of Secretary Carlito Galvez, Secretary Ed Año, Secretary Del Lorenzana, and Secretary Francisco Duque, we would not be here where we are today. The first thing the President did when COVID-19 struck was he made a very bold and swift call to action. He called for an unprecedented whole-of-nation approach. He acknowledged, as the kind of leader that he is, who always wears his heart on his sleeve, he said, government cannot do this alone. Hindi po natin kaya ito. Mabigat. Mabigat ang pandemya, mabigat ang hinaharap natin. Para kayanin natin ito at para maibsan natin ang hirap ng ating mga kababayan, kailangan natin ang tulong ng lahat. And that unprecedented whole-of-nation approach, that call of the President, signaled an unprecedented cooperation between the government, the national government, the local government units, the private sector, and all our partner countries throughout the world. And today, on behalf of the national government, on behalf of the entire country, we want to thank, first of all, our partner countries, the United States of America, the governments of Japan, China, the governments of Europe, Australia, and ASEAN for all your help. Maraming salamat po. Thank you very much. We also want to thank the private sector, who, in an unprecedented public-private partnership, in the true spirit of us coming together as one country, really helped the national government bring us to where we are today. Kaya po, mga kababayan, I just want to make a very brief report on behalf of Secretary Galvez and the entire National Task Force of where we are now. Where we are now is a far cry from where we were 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we knew very little on how to handle the pandemic. Like the entire world, we were brought to our knees. Our people got sick. Some, unfortunately, have passed away. Many of our countrymen and women have lost their jobs. Many of our small scale and medium enterprises have closed down. But because of us working together, we have managed to overcome, and now we are on our way to a full recovery. We always balanced health and the economy. Despite the many arguments, despite the difficulties that we faced in creating this very delicate balance, we have succeeded and we have prevailed. And to top that off, we could not have done it without the efforts of Secretary Galvez in really pushing our vaccination efforts. Alam niyo po, yung pagbabakuna natin, and today we are happy to report, lumampas na po tayo ng 70 million Filipinos fully vaccinated. Marami pong nagsabi na hindi natin maaabot yan. Naalala ko pa po, Secretary Charlie, marami po nagsabi, baka hindi tayo umabot ng 50 million pag natapos ang termino ni Pangulong Duterte. Ngayon po, happy kami na mag-report na may isang buwan pa po, lumampas na tayo ng 70 million. Our strategy was always based on science. Prevent, detect, isolate, treat, and reintegrate. That was our battle cry from the very beginning. Hindi po nagbago yan. And knowing that Secretary Galvez, myself, Secretary Año, Secretary Lorenzana, we're not doctors, we're not Scientists, we always relied on the science. Never po tayong lumihis sa mga rekomendasyon ng ating mga scientists, ng ating mga doktor. At dahil po dyan, nandito na po tayo ngayon. Tuloy-tuloy po tayong nagsasabi na ang pinakamainam at pinaka-epektibong proteksyon laban sa COVID-19 ay ang prevention. Ito po. Kaya po kahit na maraming mga bansa ang nagsabi na tanggalin na natin ang mask, sabi po ni Pangulong Duterte, hindi. Kailangan tuloy-tuloy pa rin po ang pagmamask dahil tuloy-tuloy pa rin po nandito ang COVID-19 at ito po almost 90% ang nagiging proteksyon na binibigay ng mask laban sa COVID-19. Ang detection po, alam niyo po, kami po ni Secretary Galvez at ni Secretary Duque noong February, nung nag-uumpisa pa lang ang COVID, hirap na hirap po tayo. Siguro nakalimutan na natin. Pero noong February of 2020, we only had one laboratory. Isa lang po. I still remember the days when we had to send our COVID specimens to Australia to get tested. And it would take us 2 weeks to 1 month to get the results. But today, because of the efforts of the DOH, together with the private sector and other government agencies and local government units, from one lab in February, we now have more than 300 labs today, all servicing the entire country, and our tests from a meager 100 tests per day. Ngayon po ay nakakapag-test tayo ng 100,000 per day. Previous slide, please. Sa isolation naman po, alam niyo po, hirap na hirap po kami ni Secretary Villar. Tinawagan po kami ni Secretary Galvez. Sabi po niya, kailangan natin ng isolation facilities dahil grabe na ang hawaan sa mga communities. Wala po tayong ganon. We did not have one single treatment and isolation facility. But because of the efforts of the DPWH, other agencies of government, and the private sector, we built facilities that accommodated close to 80,000 beds throughout the country in a matter of months. Napakalaking bagay po niyan at yan po ang isa sa mga. Dito po si Yusek Emil Sidain, siya po ang inassign ni Secretary Villar nung panahong yon. At makikita nyo po from stadiums to basketball courts to classrooms to tents, even here in the PICC. Nakagawa po tayo in a matter of months ng 80,000 beds. Next slide, please. Treatment facilities po. Unprecedented po, dito po sa PICC, we set up the One COVID Referral Center, which used to be called the One Hospital Command. Dito po, tumatawag ang ating mga kababayan nung kasagsagan ng Delta surge, nung kasagsagan ng Omicron surge. Tumawag po ang mga kababayan natin dito para makahanap ng mga ospital, para po makahanap ng mga isolation facility. Nagtayo po tayo ng state-of-the-art facility nung una sa MMDA at linipat po natin dito sa PICC. More than 200,000 telemedicine transactions, consultations were done right here by hundreds of our agents who volunteered from various agencies of government and the private sector. Another slide, sorry. And finally, because of the efforts of our economic team led by Secretary Dominguez, Secretary Carl Chua, and other agencies of government, because of our decisive, swift, and bold action over the course of the last 2 years, we were able to slowly but surely reintegrate our people back into the new normal after years of dealing with the pandemic. At dahil po dyan, nanumbalik ang trabaho, nanumbalik ang negosyo, nanumbalik ang transportasyon, nanumbalik po ang pamumuhay ng ating mga kababayan. At dahil po dyan, sabi nga ni Secretary Dominguez, 8.3% po ang paglago ng ating ekonomiya pagkatapos ng ilang quarter na bumagal ang paglago ng ating ekonomiya. We would not have been able to do this if not for the private sector cooperation as well. In an unprecedented public-private partnership through the Test, Trace, and Treat Coalition, we were able to work with our private sector partners to build labs, to build isolation facilities, to use pharmacies as vaccination areas. Alam niyo po, nakakatuwa. Sa Pilipinas lang po, nagkaroon ng bakunahan sa Jollibee at sa McDo. Sa Pilipinas lang po. Sa atin lang po nangyari yon. Nagkaroon ng bakunahan sa Jollibee, sa McDonald's, sa mga pharmacies, sa mga clinics ng doktor. At hindi po natin magagawa yan without the help of the private sector. Kaya maraming salamat po sa kanilang lahat. And finally, the vaccination program. The vaccination program met a lot of criticism in the beginning. Secretary Galvez, Secretary Duque had to endure months of criticism. Mabagal daw po ang pag-procure ng bakuna. Hindi daw po ready ang ating rollout. Pero po, to date, more than 200 million doses of life-saving vaccines have arrived in the country thanks to the efforts of Secretary Galvez and his team. 200 million doses po ang dumating na sa ating bansa. At more than 150 million na po ang nabakuna natin sa ating mga kababayan. To date po, 70 million na po ang fully vaccinated. Pero, gaya po ng sinasabi ng ating mahal na Pangulo, hindi pa po tapos ang ating laban. Marami pa po ang hindi bakunado, marami pa po ang hindi boosted, kaya ang aming paulit-ulit na panawagan sa ating mga kababayan, sa mga hindi pa po nagpapabakuna, magpabakuna na po tayo. Sa mga hindi pa po nabuboost, magpaboost na po tayo dahil po ang COVID-19 ay nandyan pa rin. Okay, please. Alam niyo po, marami pong nagsabi na hindi po kaya ng Pilipinas na mag-roll out. But again, because of the whole of nation approach called by our President, and by the heroic efforts of everybody, especially our healthcare workers, our LGUs, our agencies, and the private sector. Noong pong National Vaccination Days natin noong November, ang Pilipinas po ang pang-apat sa buong mundo na pinakamarami ang naiturok sa loob ng isang araw. Umabot po tayo sa loob ng isang araw, 2.8 million doses ang naiturok natin noong November. Pang-apat po yan sa buong mundo. Pang-apat po sa buong mundo. At ngayon po, tuloy-tuloy pa rin po tayong nagbabakuna. Pero hindi pa po tapos ang laban. At kami po ay may tiwala na itutuloy po ng susunod na administrasyon ang lahat ng ating mga ginawa at lalo pa pong paiigtingin ang ating COVID response. Dahil nandyan po ang COVID. Alam niyo po, may nababasa po ako, natatawa po ako sa mga ibang nababasa ko sa media. Meron po nagsasabi, tumataas na naman ang COVID cases. 200 na per day. Tumaas from 170. Alam niyo po ba kung ilan ang COVID cases sa Amerika ngayon? 150,000 po sa isang araw. Ang Pilipinas, 200 ang cases ngayon. Kaya siguro po, dapat po talaga ay paigtingin pa natin lalo ang ating COVID response at para tuloy-tuloy na po ang talagang paggising natin dito sa napakahabang bangungot ng COVID-19 at tuloy-tuloy na rin po ang ating pag-unlad, ang pag-unlad ng ekonomiya, ang pagbalik ng trabaho at pagbalik ng kabuhayan ng ating mga kababayan. Finally po, sabi nga po ng ating mahal na Pangulo, we must ensure that no one is left behind as we recover. Yan po ang paulit-ulit na sinasabi ng ating mahal na Pangulo at yan po ang ginawa ng ating mga kawani ng gobyerno, ng ating mga LGU, kasama ng pribadong sektor at kasama ng ating partner dahil po nanawagan ng ating Pangulo nung umpisa pa lang. Sinabi niya, unlike any leader that came before him, sinabi po ng ating Pangulo, hindi natin kaya to na tayo lang. Kailangan nating magtulungan, kailangan nating magsama-sama. in the true spirit of bayanihan. Yun po ang ating ginawa. Maraming salamat po at magandang hapon.
Yung sister ko, nagkaroon siya ng mild na upper respiratory symptom. Then by March 12, yung mom ko and pati ang dad ko, nagkaroon sila ng mild na ubosipon. Ang ginawa ko, tumawag ako sa office kasi part kami ng One Hospital Command Center. Na-testing sila. Doon na lumabas na positive lahat sila sa bahay. 3 yung namatay sa akin. So para kung pinagbagsakan ng langit at lupa.
Kamakailan po ay binuksan na ang pinakamalaking isolation facility sa bansa na matatagpuan sa bagong layong Pilipino sa Parañaque.
Ituloy ang hakbang ng pamahalaan at test, trace, and treat kontra COVID.
Sinimulan na ng Department of Social Welfare and Development ang pamamahagi ng second tranche ng Social Amelioration Program.
Sa Lunes na isasagawa ang COVID-19 vaccination rollout ng pamahalaan.
I said it before and I will say it again. COVID-19 vaccines should be treated as a global public good and made available to all, rich and poor alike. No nation, no people should be left to suffer the ravages of this pandemic for whatever reason.
So sabi ko sa mga kamag-anak ko noon, o ayan, nagsisimula ng magbaba sa community. Huwag nyo nang intayin magkaroon pa ng COVID sa inyo kasi kumbaga naranasan na namin.
Ang nakita natin sa fast tracking ng vaccination, ang gusto natin is yung whole of nation, whole of government approach. Unang-una, naging steady na yung supply natin, more than enough para sa ating herd immunity target. Ang next achievement natin is sunod-sunod na 1 million plus ang ating job per day. Talagang kung titingnan natin, parang madali na i-deploy mo yung vaccine sa mga different areas. Pero considering that we have more than how many islands na talagang separated by waters, talaga yung isang yung challenge yun. Third na achievement natin is napababa natin yung mga kaso. Nakikita natin ito isang magandang ng ating mahal na presidente na hindi tayo pinabayaan. Nakita natin yung ating negotiation. I have bear fruits because of the good relations that we have from China, from Russia, and also from US.
Nakikita ko na meron tayong plano para sa mga, sabihin natin sa response. Gagawin ko lahat na para makatulong sa ibang tao. Sabi ko sa munting bagay na gano'n, yung sa pagkukonsulta ko, sabi ko gagawin ko para sa kanila. Pagbibigay pugay sa mga mahal ko sa buhay na namatay. Walang country na preparado para harapin yung pandemya. Kahit mali tayong country, mahirap pa tayo, natutugunan na natin yung pangangailangan natin na kailangan tugunan para sa pandemya. Yun lang, kumbaga, dapat masayan tayo, maging proud na tayo.
Let us now give the floor for COVID-19 response beneficiary, Dr. Ellen Mutia.
Magandang hapon po sa inyong lahat. Para po sa ating kagalang-galang na Pangulo, President Rodrigo Duterte, sa ating distinguished guest po, sa lahat po ng naririto sa Legacy Summit. Ako po si Ellen Mutia, isang doktor at namumuno po sa Health Emergency Management Unit ng Department of Health, Metro Manila Center for Health Development. Ako po ay isang anak at kapatid. Ako po ay natutuwa dahil nabigyan po ako ng pagkakataon na mailahad po yung nangyari sa pamilya namin upang makahikayat po ng ibang tao para po tapos na po natin ang ating kinakaharap na pandemya. Noong nakaraang taon po, March 2021, ang buong pamilya ko po ay nagkaroon ng COVID. Lahat po sila nagkaroon po ng mga komplikasyon, 3 po ang namatay. Una po dito ang aking ama noong March 16, sinundan po ng aking ina noong March 19 at nung huli po ang aking kapatid po na nag-iisang lalaki noong March 23. Ako po ay nagkaroon din ng COVID at na-admit sa ospital. Umabot po ng 2 buwan bago po ako nakabalik sa trabaho kahit po hingal na hingal po ako at nanghihina po gawa ng COVID. Marami pong serbisyo na ginawa po ang gobyerno at nailahad na po yun kanina. pagpahintulot niyo po, nabanggitin ko pa ang mga ibang serbisyo na hindi nasabi. Ang gobyerno po natin ay nagkaroon ng emergency hiring upang magpadala po ng mga medical personnel sa lahat ng parte ng bansa, sa lahat ng region po, upang madagdagan po ang mga nagjo-duty sa ospital at mga facilities. Nagbigay po ng PPE, mask, alcohol at iba pong pangangailangan. Nagkaroon din po ng COVID compensation para sa mga trabahante po na nagkaroon po ng COVID, yung mga ating healthcare frontline workers po. Tapos po, meron din po tayong malasakit center sa lahat ng ospital po. Ito po'y malaking tulong sa amin sapagkat 5 po kami na ospital noon at wala po kaming binayaran, gawa po ng no balance billing. At higit sa lahat po, ang pagbibigay po ng libreng bakuna. Gaya po ng sinasabi ng ating Health Secretary, Francisco Duque III po, ang bakuna ay ligtas, epektibo, libre at nilalaan po para sa lahat. Kung ang aking magulang po ay mabot sa pagbabakuna, malamang po buhay pa po sila hanggang ngayon. Bilang pagpapatunay po sa kahalagahan ng bakuna, meron po akong kaibigan, 13 po sila sa kanilang pamilya, at lahat po ay nakasurvive sa COVID dahil po sila po ay nabakunahan. Marami po ngayon mga healthcare workers ang hindi na po nagkakaroon ng sakit ng COVID, gawa ng nakumpleto po nila ang kanilang bakuna at nabigyan din po sila ng booster. Ako po at ang mga kapatid ko at ang aming mga pamilya po ay nagpabakuna po sa COVID dahil alam po namin na ang pagbabakuna sa COVID ang tanging paraan po para matapos po ang ating pandemya. Kaya malaki po ang aking pasasalamat sa ating Pangulo at sa Administrasyong Duterte, sa National Task Force at sa lahat po ng frontline workers sa pagtulong po nila sa pagbabakuna po. Hindi po sapat ang pasasalamat lang po dahil sa serbisyong inyong patuloy na ibinibigay po. To lose is to gain at nawala po ang aking pamilya, ngunit pinagtibay po nito ang aking dedikasyon po para tumulong po at patuloy ko pong ilalahad ang nangyari sa pamilya ko upang makapagkumbinsi po na magpabakuna po ang ibang tao at magpa-booster din po dahil dagdag na protection po ang booster. Alam po natin na dumarating ng time na bumababa po yung immunity binibigay at kailangan po ang booster para masiguro po natin na mahihinto po natin ang pandemya dahil as a nation, we heal as one. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay tayong lahat.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ellen. Your resiliency is such an inspiration, and kudos to all the hardworking men and women of the national government who, up until now, are tirelessly working to stir our way out of this pandemic. You know, JC, hearing the report of Secretary Vince Dizon towards the end of today really sort of wraps up the achievements of this government. We heard about the infrastructure and the soft programs, but I think the COVID response, as he said, is the reason why we're still here. So thank you so much to the cabinet secretaries and to the Duterte administration for this.
Truly something that we should all be proud of and really thankful of. And apart from Secretary Dizon's highlights on our COVID accomplishments, a lot of exciting new things, a lot of exciting output reported as of day one of our Legacy Summit. And Daphne, you and I, we were sitting at the back, and each and every report was as stellar as it is rightful to be reported right here today.
Just the subway alone is something that we are really looking forward to, Secretary Tugade. Thank you.
We'd like to thank everybody. We're almost at the home stretch of day one of our Legacy Summit. We'd like to remind our friends from the media and our partner agencies to please stick around. Right here at the same venue, we will have a video presser facilitated by none other than our ASEC JV Arsena. And Daphne, I think it is really worth to note that we could, thank each and every department, each and every secretary that has reported the good news for day one of our Legacy Summit. But of course, we'd like to thank first and foremost Secretary Martin Andanar, our head of PCOO, Secretary Acting Presidential Spokesperson. Maraming salamat, Secretary Andanar.
Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea, sir.
Maraming salamat, Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea, our Secretary for Department of National Defense, Secretary Delfin Lorenzana. Thank you.
Infrastructure and Development, Undersecretary of DPWH.
There you are. It's our Infrastructure Development, of course, on behalf of Secretary Roger Mercado, our Undersecretary Emil Sadain for DPWH, as well as our Department of Transportation Secretary Arthur Tugade. And then, of course,
Economic Development Secretary Carlos Dominguez III, Department of Finance.
yes, and our Acting Secretary Jim Sampulna for the Climate Change Adaptation and Mitigation and Disaster Risk Reduction, as well as
DILG Secretary Eduardo Año, and DSWD Secretary Rolando Bautista.
and of course, for COVID-19 response, our Presidential Advisor for COVID-19 response, Secretary Vince Dizon. Congratulations. Let's give a big round of applause to our first batch of good news reports, our stellar cast of our secretaries, each and every department, giving us the good news for the day one of Duterte Legacy Summit. And we were also joined again by a lot of our special guests, our luminaries, Her Excellency Ambassador Joharia Wahab of the Brunei Embassy, Mr. Kahirul Hazwan Noor, Deputy Chief of Mission of the Brunei Embassy, His Excellency Ambassador Songkhan Luang Muninthon of the Laos Embassy, His Excellency Ambassador Agus Widjoho of the Indonesian Embassy, Mr. R. Kusuma Pradopo, Minister Counselor of the Indonesian Embassy, Her Excellency Ambassador Betty Palazzo of Papua New Guinea Embassy, His Excellency Ambassador Huang Hoi Chung of the Vietnamese Embassy, and His Excellency Ambassador Ilan Fuss of the Israeli Embassy.
We also have with us the Chargé d'Affaires of the U.S., Ms. Heather Variava, the U.S. Embassy Political Section Representative Ms. Marjorie Gadi, His Excellency Ambassador Koshikawa Kazuhiko of the Japanese Embassy, Ms. Masahiro Nakata, the Minister for Economic Affairs of the Japanese Embassy, His Excellency Ambassador Songkane.
As mentioned, Ambassador Songkane, of course, from the Laos Embassy, and we have our political officer, Canadian Embassy, Mr. Peter Wright, His Excellency Ambassador Peter Kell, for our ambassador from New Zealand Embassy, and as well as Mr. Tim Given, the Deputy Chief of Mission for the New Zealand Embassy. Ladies and gentlemen, earlier, I think we have a special live treat for all of you. You heard this when the video was playing, but we're talking about this, and it's the common theme. It is Tatak Duterte. And then, of course, our Cabinet Secretary, Melvin Matibag, is right here present for all of us. And just to wish everybody congratulations, as well as officially close our day one before we present to you our feature band playing Tatak Duterte for today. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, our Cabinet Secretary, Melvin Matibag.
My colleagues in the cabinet, led by Executive Secretary Salvador Medialdea, members of the Diplomatic Corps, our friends from media, and of course, fellow government workers and other partners and stakeholders, ladies and gentlemen. We prepared a long speech, but we heard so much from the 6th cabinet cluster, and I think they've already said enough what is a Duterte legacy. Ano po ba ang pamana sa atin ng Duterte administration? We heard testimonies from the people who benefited from the projects and policies that was implemented by our government. And maraming salamat po, Pangulong Duterte, for doing and fulfilling your promises. Tama po yung sinabi kanina ni Sec. Vince Dizon na action speaks louder than words. And I think considering that we have a pandemic, our economic team have done very good job. The Build project was there. The vaccination, we are being criticized when we started the rollout of the vaccination, but we proved that we have done everything right for our country. And to end this speech, I want to share the latest numbers of the President. 73% approval rating, 8% disapproval, 0 approval rating in Northern Luzon, in Eastern Visayas, and in Mindanao. Siguro ito po yung patunay ng Duterte legacy should live in forever, and let's make sure, and we will make sure that the transition of this government, na yung mga pamana at ang legacy ng Pangulong Duterte ay may pagpatuloy at maprotektahan. Maraming salamat po sa inyong pagdalo, and we are hoping to see all of you tomorrow. Magandang hapon po.
Once again, ladies and gentlemen, our Cabinet Secretary, Mr. Melvin Matibag. A home stretch, that about wraps up our day one, of course, of the Duterte Legacy Summit. We wish you all well. We'd like to encourage everyone to please stay, especially our friends from the media, our partner agencies. The virtual presser is coming up next. And now, as we close the day one program, we leave you with Joshua Bondoc and his band performing Tatak Duterte. Have a good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Maraming salamat, Pangulong Duterte. Maraming salamat sa mga nag-attend. Ito na ang closing song namin para sa inyo, ang Tatak Duterte.
Ikutin mo ang Pilipinas. Tingnan mo ang mga binago niya. Basta Tatak Duterte, ikaw ang panalo. Basta Tatak Duterte, ikaw ang panalo.
Parang kailangan ang bilis ng panahon. Anim na taon, tila isang pitik na kahapon. Yung nga lang, iba na ngayon. Gumising ka na sa makabago. Para ako, umangat na ang buhay. Pangarap mo ay nagkapulay. Noon imposible, ngayon libre. Tuition, irigasyon, pangkalusugan. Libre yan, basta ay nataynigo. Sino mag-aakala? Drogas, krimen ay mababa. Buhay mo, inuuna niya. Tayak, ligtas at manatag ka pa. Ikutin mo Pilipinas. Tignan mo mga binago niya. Ibandera, mga pagbabago. Yan ang pamana ng Pangulo. Duterte, ikaw ang panalo. Duterte, ikaw ang panalo. Ang dating pangarap, nagkatotoo. Hindi na pa ako ang iyong pangako. Lumiit ang buwis ni nanay at tatay. Umahon pa ang aming buhay. Matapang at tatak kamao. Nilaban ang mga tiwalit. Sindikat na mapayapa sa Mindanao. Malinis na ang Islang Boracay. May malasakit sa mga may sakit. Lobre sahod na sundalang pulis. Mahon bakuna ang sagot niya. Mabang tayo, huwag kang mag-alala. Sino mag-aakala? Drogat, krimen ay mababa. Buhay mo, inuuna niya. Kaya ligtas at manatag ka ba? Tara, ikutin mo
Pilipinas. Tingnan mo mga binago niya.
ibandera,
Mga pagbabago. Yan ang pamana ng Pangulo. Basta Tatak Duterte, ikaw ang panalo. Basta Tatak Duterte, ikaw ang panalo.
Parang kailangan nakikita mo. Kalagwat ka ng mga proyekto. Kasada, tulay, airport at puerto. Yan ang pamana ng pagbabago. Galingat para sa akin sa mga Pilipino. Puso mo ay para sa OFW. Natulong sa may hirap, inuulan mo. Para sa bayan, di ka sumusuko. Sino mag-aakala? Drogat, krimen ay bababa. Buhay mo, inuuna niya. Tiyak, ligtas at manatag ka ba?
Tara, ikutin mo ang Pilipinas. Tingnan mo mga binago niya.
Ibandera,
Mga pagbabago.
para lang sa'yo. Bagong-bago para sa Pilipino. 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 Pilipinas. Tingnan mo. Ako niya. Di bandera. Mga pagbabago. Kaya mamana. Ng Pangulo. Basta tatak Duterte. Ikaw ang panalo. Basta tatak Duterte. Ikaw ang panalo.
Maraming salamat, Pangulong Duterte. Para sa mga iniwan mo para sa mga taong bayan. Ikaw po talaga ang tatay.
Hello.
Maraming salamat.
Good afternoon. May we request all the guests who will be attending the virtual